OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
And a very good morning to you. Welcome along this Monday morning. It is officially the 1st of March. Isn't that a better way to look at life when, you know, there's a grand stretch in the evening, there's a bit of warmth in the air, the daffodils are up and the sport is beginning to mean a lot more, except in the Premier League, of course, which we already know is toast because Manchester City are one of the greatest teams of all time. It's their world and we're just living in it. Oh, and good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, Ger. How are things?
Good. We'll talk about Wales, don't worry. Hello to all our Welsh viewers who are hate watching this morning. You're very welcome along and thanks for swelling our numbers. And keep the happy comments coming on our Twitter accounts and, of course, on the YouTube stream. But we've got to start with the latest version of The Beef is Real because it turns out revenge is a dish best served cold. That's what Roy Keane was doing to Matt Doherty at the weekend. Matt Doherty must have been sitting in the dressing room going, I'm not even in the team here and I'm getting absolutely hammered. Like, he turns his phone on afterwards and goes, I just come off the bench for 10 minutes. We won 4-0. I mean, I'm surely not going to be the focus of anything that's happening in the world right now, except, yes, he was. It looked like it was collateral damage in an argument that Roy Keane was having with Jamie Redknapp, but actually, there was nothing collateral about it. This was a heat-seeking missile that Keane had been slowly gestating for a period of time. And, are we talking about Spurs? An opportunity for me to talk about Matt Doherty here, randomly. I'm going to pick him with all the fullbacks who aren't performing particularly well at the moment for Spurs. Matt Doherty, yeah, going to have a go at him. What's this all about, Owen?
Well, this isn't the first time that Roy Keane has tried to have a nibble at Matt Doherty. He tried it on ITV last November, but maybe because Sky Sports has got this absolute behemoth of a social push behind it, and because it involved this massive argument with Jamie Redknapp yesterday came to the fore. But just a reminder of what happened last November. Ireland got beaten 1-0 by Wales. A game where Brooks scored the winner. I think Gareth Bale was playing Matt Doherty. And Roy Keane says, I'm looking at Doherty now and he's 28 years of age. Bale attacks it well. But you look at Doherty, he's trying to win a header against Gareth Bale at the far post. He spoke after the game against England and how it's embarrassing at the moment. Well, he should be embarrassed with his defending. So that's what he said about Matt Doherty last year. Didn't catch any fire, but as you say, yesterday, he had the opportunity to perhaps stick the needle in once again. This goes back to Matt Doherty, who did an interview pretty quickly after Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane had left their role as Republic of Ireland manager and assistant manager. And he was asked, Matt Doherty, what was Roy Keane's role? And he said, I guess he was Martin's assistant. I guess that he must have fed ideas off him on whatever he was thinking. It wasn't necessarily a case where he would take the session and we're doing shape work, or if the ball goes there, we're all pushing up, lads. It wasn't a case of him doing that at all. I guess he was just back up to Martin. I wouldn't say he was much of a hands-on in terms of an on-the-pitch assistant. And then this kind of permeated into Matt Doherty's general view of the Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane era, that they were not very hands-on when it came to shape and tactics, and that the training in preparation for games was fairly rudimentary. He talks about the day before a game, you do a few set pieces here and there, and you're thinking to yourself, what shape are we going to play going into a game? Pretty damning criticism of any manager, I think it's fair to say. Martin O'Neill was absolutely infuriated with this, described as old school by Matt Doherty, that he picks up the phone to Doherty and absolutely lashes him out of it.
Yeah.
He said that the call was not a good call.
Before you get to that, 1 second before. So Doherty picks up the phone and doesn't know who it is. So he obviously didn't have the manager's number. And O'Neill says, a friend of mine heard your interview on the radio. It's always one of the mates you've got to be wary of, who misreports some of the stuff, you know, amplifies it, maybe stretches exactly what was said a little bit, and then delivers it to you. You won't believe what Matt Doherty was just saying about you on the radio. That's how that went.
I wonder who the friend was.
No.
That was actually listening to it.
Nobody listens to that show anyway, so, I mean, I don't know.
He said that he didn't know it was him. He didn't know it was Martin O'Neill when Martin O'Neill called him, so he doesn't have O'Neill's phone number saved into his phone. And he was shocked, he said, when he realised it was him. He called him a tosser a few times. We kind of got back and forth, he said. He was saying some things, and I ended up saying, oh, you're a liar, and stuff like that. So Martin O'Neill calls Matt Doherty a tosser. Doherty calls Martin O'Neill a liar. And then Martin O'Neill hangs up on Matt Doherty. This is in an interview with Richie Sadler where he goes through all of this, and he says, I could go into more detail. I just don't want to bring it all back up again when it's totally gone now. It wasn't a nice phone call at all. He said that the relationship with O'Neill never clicked. And I guess Roy Keane would say that his performances under Stephen Kenny and under José Mourinho also have not clicked. And in fairness, he's probably due warranted criticism this season, but with Roy Keane, there was definitely an extra edge to what he was saying.
Is it 3 years on and Keane's like, yeah, this is my chance? And he's right. That's the problem. The things haven't gone well for Doherty, and Doherty hasn't established himself in that side. He was supposed to take this opportunity to kick on and nail down a place in that side, although everybody was concerned from the get-go that José Mourinho likes to play 4 at the back, and he's coming from a scenario where his best football was all played where he was a wing-back. Maybe Thomas Tuchel could get a nicer tune out of Matt Doherty than José Mourinho is at the moment, but I can't see him signing for Chelsea anytime soon. So the way things are going, you would have some concerns for Doherty's form and his place in the team. Maybe he gets back in the team. But yeah, you win 4-0, you're coming off the bench thinking, okay, you know, things are going okay. And then Matt Doherty picks up his phone. It's like, ah, man, really? All of this because I just said what I thought about. It's a bit harsh. It is a bit harsh. Look, we'll talk more about the football a little bit later on. David Meyler is going to join us. If you have any thoughts on Gareth Bale suddenly coming back into form as the weather gets good again, and, you know, he needs to find somewhere to play football next year. He doesn't really need to find somewhere to play football. It's still under contract at Real Madrid, so we'll see what happens with that. The other thing that we should talk about is Wales, the greatest team in the history of World Rugby. I mean, that's all there is to it. There can be no doubts about it now. They didn't just beat England at the weekend on the scoreboard, they absolutely annihilated them on the scoreboard. And there was nothing else to talk about in that match. There was no controversy as far as I could make out. Nothing, no great injustice done to... I mean, it's hard to feel too much sympathy for England, right? Because normally this is completely happening the other way around.
Yeah, like I think that's definitely the case. You almost want Wales to get out in front and smash England in those scenarios. There was a huge element of comedy to how England got beaten not only by Wales but by the officiating at the weekend, and the tight-lipped efforts by Owen Farrell and Eddie Jones after the game as well also added a layer of comedy to it, because if the tables were turned, you could imagine Eddie Jones laughing his way to a Grand Slam if that had happened. So, like, this fixture is just remarkable. Wales against England tends to deliver. 2 years ago, I remember the 2019 game being really good as well. Maybe not a whole pile of people actually expected Wales to win on that night 2 years ago, and maybe fewer people this season expected them to beat England. I will say you are one of the people, despite all the criticism you give on Wales this season, who did expect it. You did see it coming 2 years ago when they beat England. I think you predicted them from the Grand Slam, which they ended up doing.
Yeah.
This year, you definitely did not do that.
No.
But it turns out the result might actually be the very same thing.
Well, I mean, look, not to reopen old wounds. My point was that we had a chance in the first week to blow off whatever was coming to prevent Wales from getting off to a good start, as did the Scots. If Ireland and Scotland had beaten Wales the way both teams should have done, would the pressure on Wayne Pivac have got to the point where that Welsh team crumbled against England? It might have. Would Dan Biggar have had the confidence to try that crossfield kick for the penalty? I mean, one of the things that we haven't really, that has not been talked about much, is the execution that Wales had for that first try is off the charts, given the level of pressure that they're under at that point, and the fact that you're turning down the quick 3 points. The other thing is their skill set is unbelievable. Like, the heaviest set of the players, the flattest of feet of the players can flick the ball one-handed straight into the breadbasket of somebody who's like in any range of 10 to 15 metres away. It's a skill set that we don't have, really. They're operating at a higher level. And I think that's why they can randomly come from nowhere some seasons and win Grand Slams. And they did that like all the way back under Mike Ruddock when they won that Grand Slam. And they've done it a couple of times since. I really think, though, that Ireland missed a big opportunity in not that whole don't give a sucker and even break thing. The pressure on Pivac would have been absolutely insane after the year that he had last year. And we had a man sent off. They played really badly in that game. We still could have snatched a victory at the end if we hadn't kicked the ball out in the full. And that's the difference between Andy Farrell being under absolutely massive pressure and Wales now hurtling towards a Grand Slam, because they're going to play that French team who will be recovering from COVID. And are they going to be okay? I'm not so sure. Like, it is one of the weirdest Grand Slams you're ever going to see. Man sent off, 2 slightly dodgy tries, Italy, COVID France. Happy days, 5 out of 5, suck it, basically.
It's like, how many games does it take before a coach is actually under pressure? Like, I would say that if you lose 3 or 4 on the bounce, you're under serious pressure. And the great thing about the Six Nations is that Italy exists. So if you have Italy in the middle of your World Cup or if your Six Nations schedule, you're not going to be under any pressure, really, because you'll always have this day out where you feel really good about yourself and your team looks absolutely amazing. I know that's neither here nor there when it comes to Wales. They'll go out and they'll beat them comprehensively the next day. Wales will probably beat them by a smaller margin maybe than France did a few weeks ago, and you could still see them taking France and actually winning the Grand Slam at this point. So it's been a mad old campaign, and it doesn't feel any different to how it did a couple of seasons ago. That massive occasion in the Millennium Stadium, and yeah, I guess that's testament to the rugby. There was just some brilliant action there on Saturday.
We're going to speak to Alan Quinlan right now. Let me tell you, OTBAM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We've got our coming up. I'll tell you what's coming up between now and 10 a.m. Alan Quinlan standing by. Rob Kearney, we're going to talk to him live from Australia at 8:05. Take you through the sports pages at 8:25. Brian Kerr at 8:35, looking back on the games yesterday. David Meyler at 8:45, talking about all the weekend stuff. Our performance rankings from the weekend: bad, medium, and good. A couple of very good performances over the course of the weekend, and then more reaction from the weekend coming at 9:30 as well. Thom Malone is going to join us as well to talk to us about the scandal that is enveloping Gordon Elliott this morning after he was pictured sitting on top of a dead horse on his gallops. Now, let's turn our attention to rugby, and I'm delighted to say Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are you?
Yeah, so you beat what's in front of you. All those old adages are true, but I think there was enough in that performance from Ireland to suggest that most of the questions we had about whether or not there was a plan, whether or not there was a style being bedded in, there is a plan, there is a style being bedded in. It hasn't been successful up to this point, but it was successful at the weekend.
Yeah, and they were obviously able to implement that Ireland on Saturday much easier than playing against the other top teams, I suppose, in the Six Nations. So it's certainly a confidence booster, Ger, and to for some of the passes and the offloads and the lines of running to be good. I think in stick, you could see the players were enjoying it, and they put a hapless Italian side away. They probably should have scored more points and more tries. Probably the period when Italy were down to 13 men. That was the period I was a bit disappointed, and it got a little bit flat. But they were dreadful. Ireland were very good, and you have got to give them credit for that. They do get a fair bit of stick, and the debate about whether the Irish rugby team gets enough of flack in the media has rumbled on for a couple of years, but I think they do, and they get extra scrutiny, probably more so than ever now. And I've said this, and I've been involved in games against Italy before. You're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you get a good scoreline and a big win, straight away the focus, even my own focus, thinks, well, Italy were dreadful, and Ireland should have scored more. So you've got to give them credit. Scrutinising the other games, the first 2 games, we picked out all that was wrong with the attack and decision making and anticipation around runners carrying the ball and all that kind of stuff. But on Saturday, it was very, very positive.
Yeah, like I definitely felt like the first game when we had a man sent off was kind of unfair to make too much judgment on, given that so much of your attacking, a lot of it, particularly nowadays, comes from when you get turnover ball, you go quickly. Certainly that's what they're doing with Leinster, and it looks like that's what Munster are doing under the new part of the coaching ticket recently. And when you go down to 14 men, you can't do that. The France game was very disappointing, but France are actually really, really good at rugby. That's the other side of that, is like we managed to find a way to get into a game against a side who are the most exciting team. Okay, so we haven't seen enough Southern Hemisphere versus Northern Hemisphere teams for a whole 12 months at this point, so we don't know where they stand versus New Zealand, but they're pretty exciting.
And the problem with the French game is we're underpowered. You're missing James Ryan, you're missing Conor Murray, Sexton, Doris is not there, O'Mahony's not there, Kilcoyne is not coming off the bench, and the depth chart isn't as strong. And when you play a physical side like France, they're very, very powerful side. And there was a lot of good stuff in the early parts of that French game. We just couldn't break them down. the James Lowe try. If he gets that, it's a conversion from the touchline, but it's possibly 10-0 to Ireland. The whole picture of the game changes. And you look at the Charles Olivon try, the first try, defensive mistake, not stopping the offload. So there are mistakes that they could look back on and say, we should have been better here in these situations. So it wasn't, it wasn't all doom and gloom, but we did highlight the fact that we kicked the ball 47 times in that game. And I've had this debate with people in the last couple of weeks. If you're winning matches and you're ahead and you're putting pressure on the opposition to try and come at you and break you down, and defensively you're strong, you can kick the leather off the ball. It can frustrate the life out of the opposition, and they've got to play, and you get opportunities then in the wider parts of the pitch to get turnovers, make tackles, force knock-ons, force loose passes. And we weren't in that situation. So I think it was a panicky approach and a very pragmatic approach to try and play territory. And a lot of the kicks were good, but there were some poor kicks that just stopped us playing. And it was we were very robotic in that game. So, we probably need to loosen the shackles a bit more and be more ambitious in the approach. You can do that against Italy. So look, that's the synopsis here. That's the scenario. We can do that against Italy, and we kicked the ball 17 times. So kicking the ball 30 times less against Italy shows that if we play a bit, we have some really good players, and some of the execution on Saturday was really poor. And I suppose the main focus is Italy were dreadful, but if you look at their performance in Twickenham, they were very, very competitive against England, but defensively they've been poor, and they've been porous against France in the first game as well. They actually played quite well against France with the ball on occasions in the first game as well. So it's certainly a mixture of both. Ireland can take a fair bit out of that game, but they've got to bring it forward into Scotland. That's where the pressure kind of ramps up again. Can they finish on a high in the Six Nations and beat Scotland and beat England at home? We'll have to wait and see. But I thought Saturday there was a lot of pleasing aspects to the game, and their execution was much better.
There was a lot of frustration, I think, Alan, over the first couple of weeks because there wasn't a clear identity to how Ireland were actually attacking a game. What was their plan on Saturday? Is there now a clear attacking identity?
Well, a clear attacking identity is sometimes you can't see that as obvious as you'd like because of the opposition. I think they tried to, against Wales and France, they did try to play a bit, but at times it was very, very static. And I think the timing of the run, their shape of phase play was really poor in some of those matches, because at international rugby you very rarely see tries of first or second phase because defenses are too good, they're too organised. It's really when you get into that multi-phase scenario of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 phases, whatever, that holes appear, and you've got to really, really be accurate in the lines of running. It's not just your back line, it's all the forwards when you spread right across the field, and it's that kind of shape and attack stuff that you need to be better at. I've always said this with the Six Nations, Ireland under pressure around the attack, but it's sometimes it takes a couple of matches. So the point I'm making is on Saturday, they're on the front foot. Like, their set piece has been really good, the line-up and the scrum, and their breakdown has been excellent throughout the tournament. They haven't turned the ball over at the breakdown. I think it was 98% success against France and at the weekend against Italy, winning their own ball. But it's just that attack and shape, and that's urgency to get back into position for forwards, run good lines, be an option to carry the ball rather than be a frontline runner where the ball is passed out behind you and you're no threat to the opposition defence. So I think there was examples of that on Saturday that was much better. Those lines are running. And this is stuff, Rog said it on Friday, this is stuff that you practice in training, and it all looks great in training when you're not really fatigued and you don't have the same level of contact that you're having in the match. So I think they are trying to play with a little bit more expansively. But the number, I keep going back to it against France, the number of kicks, well, it's very hard to attack if you kick that much. So we kicked the ball 30 less times on Saturday against Italy. And then with that execution and that shape and attack right across the field, it being much better. And, there's times where you do have to just truck it up and give it to the forwards. But I'm always saying this, if you can put a bit of footwork on it, square up, try and get between two defenders, that ruck is quick and you can play then. So we saw a lot more positivity around that and in the shape and the attack on Saturday, which was, as I said, was pleasing.
All right, I want to play you this. It's Johnny Sexton talking about Craig Casey. Have a look.
We've come in for some flack over the last few weeks, but internally, as a group, I don't think we've ever been more confident about where we're going and what we can produce. And I mean that properly, that with the coaches that we have, with the leadership group coming out of their shells and improving their leadership, I think that this group is on the right trajectory, and I properly believe that. And those two guys are going to play a huge part. Like their character, like Craig Casey, I didn't know him that well, obviously, because I've never played with him, but his attitude is, I don't think I've ever come across anyone. It kind of reminds me of what I read about Johnny Wilkinson. Really, that's the only person I can relate it to, and it's inspiring for the rest of the group. For someone like me, even at this stage of my career, I like to be last off the pitch, and I'm never last off the pitch now with him around. So he's been brilliant, and Ryan was outstanding when he came on. He's got that energy and incredible athlete. So the future is bright with those two leading the charge.
We'll talk about Casey in a second, because obviously he's getting a good bit of the attention. But you've been talking about Ryan Baird a long way back. Very hopeful that he would have got his run in the end of last year's Six Nations. That was after everything came back. But injuries and everything else got in the way of him. Why have you been so excited, and what did you see at the weekend from Baird?
I just think he's a brilliant footballer. He's so athletic, he's quick, he's aggressive, he's explosive. He's a bit like Caelan Doris. He has that ability to find space, to be on someone's shoulder, to have that anticipation, and to not be kind of. You need to have a structure and a plan and stick to the structure and a plan at times. But he's someone who you can give him the ball and you just think that he's going to run across field, he's going to fend someone, he's going to find a bit of space, or he's going to be on the shoulder of somebody if they make a line break. And plus, and he's carries off 9. He explodes into those carries. Physically, he probably needs to get a little bit bigger and stronger, and that will come with age and time, to play at the very, very top level. When you're coming up against the likes of Willems and Bernard Leroux, the French second rows, if Ryan Baird is in there, that's a different story. And the step up to international level is different. So, he's been kind of slowly, been with the group for probably a year now, and he's been phased into it. And as you said, the injuries in November probably stopped him getting more involvement. So, I just think he's an intelligent footballer who brings loads of energy. And I think the endorsement from Johnny Sexton there, that's exactly what you want within your squad. I remember when I played with Munster and young guys coming through, it excites everyone when the players themselves start talking about these guys, what they bring, and the real energy and an attitude as well, So I think he's a very, very good player, and he still has a lot to learn and probably needs to be a bit more physically imposing, but that will come with time. But
Sexton really damped down the hype around Craig Casey by comparing him to Johnny Wilkinson as well.
Yeah, and as you said, it's the attitude. That's what you want. It's hard to. You can't coach attitude in guys. Of course, they can learn to be more professional and understand what's required and the hard nature of international rugby and the effort levels that everybody's going to, and the commitment that players at that level, the top players, make. But to get an endorsement like that from Johnny Sexton for Craig Casey and for Ryan Baird is brilliant for them. And I would suspect it's not just patting them on the back and trying to build their confidence. These guys are, and that's what you want from young players, Ger. You want them to come in with no baggage. They're not worried about what happened in the Five Nations in 1990 or the World Cup in 2019. It's not in their mind at all. They're just thinking, I'm in here with Ireland now. I'm full of confidence, full of self-belief. And there's an envy in me looking back at my career when I started off with Ireland, and I did a piece in Saturday in the Indo just talking about the nerves, the fear of failure, the ability to think, I'm totally out of my comfort zone here with Munster. That's where I'm comfortable. That's where I kind of trust everyone around me and I can play better. And I'm nervous a little bit with Ireland and worried a little bit. And that's sometimes in the individual. But when you see these guys bouncing around the place, they're full of confidence and energy. And they will have setbacks. They'll have bad games. They'll make poor decisions. They'll be criticised. And it's how they deal with that. But having that sort of maturity very young is a positive thing. And it does bring a positive energy into the squad. So it doesn't surprise me about Craig Casey. I know his dad well. His dad was involved in Shannon for years when I was there. Craig was only a little baby when I was playing with Shannon. Mossy Lawler's his uncle, who I played with when Munster, was a great player, Mossy. And, so I've heard about Craig for a long, long time, and I know him. And it doesn't surprise me that that's the attitude. He's continuously working on his game, and
does he have to stay?
It's still very early days.
Yeah, but does he have to stay in the squad now for the Scotland game? Because that excitement and that level of excitement that they bring, there's no point in having that around the camp if it's not actually on the bench and ready to come into the game. Like we the Italy game is great and it's a great opportunity, but really it would feel like a lost opportunity for Ireland if we didn't include this now for the next two games.
Yeah, does he have to stay there? Well, that's the conundrum for Andy Farrell, because if he brings Conor Murray back in and puts him on the bench and Gibson Park starts, or vice versa, then, and they were to lose in Scotland, you're kind of saying we're losing this opportunity to expose these guys to keep building them. I would try and keep him there. I think if he's bringing that much confidence and energy, I'm not sure on it, Ger, because I'd be lying if I said, I'm split on that one, because I think you're really going to need experience and a real guile and a physicality and to go over and beat Scotland. And maybe if we don't win the game, you have to win these Six Nations games, and they have a dreadful start. So it's a must-win game. So experience is something that does get you across the line, but that will probably frustrate the fans then and supporters of Irish rugby if he's not involved, if Ryan Baird is not involved. So I'm not really sure. I'm not 100% sure, but I'd probably be leaning for keep these guys involved. And worst case scenario, we lose the game, but at least you're exposing these guys to more international rugby. And we're in the middle of that World Cup cycle, and we've always been critical. And people have been critical on the outside of us peaking at the wrong times and all that. But there is a massive pressure, and I keep reiterating this point, and that comes from the IRFU as well. Yeah. And it's down to brass tacks, winning, getting money. We're in the middle of the pandemic, so I don't think anyone from the IRFU will be influencing Andy Farrell and telling him who he should pick, but it is a must-win game, and they'll have to sit down, and it'll be interesting. I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that coaches meeting if Conor Murray is fit and available, but he hasn't played in a couple of weeks now. So
when we talked pre-tournament about that and about selection, and I was like asking you about Tadhg Furlong had barely played, you were like, get him straight back into the squad, straight back into the team as quickly as you can. With Carbery, is it a different scenario because of the length of layoff was even longer than the year that we had? Or again, there is somebody who, if he was coming off the bench, you'd feel much more confident from an Irish perspective.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, and I think I'd be more cautious, and I think most Irish rugby people would be, that give him a couple of more weeks of being involved with Munster, putting on the boots, doing the warm-ups, all that match preparation, because of the nature of the injury that he had and the way he broke down the last time. It's always going to be a risk. Him being coming off the bench the other night was a risk. I think they've taken a long time, and they've probably taken an extra period of time to make sure. So if he's fit and ready, maybe he goes back in and trains with him. I don't know, but I wouldn't be in the same position as rushing him back. Tadhg Furlong is a world-class player who I think there was a real need to get him back in there. I'd be a bit more cautious with Joey Carbery, to be fair, and I think they will be too, because there's a bigger picture of trying to get him back up and running, and there'd probably be a nervousness around if he broke down with Ireland, or God forbid something happened to him in Ireland training. It would be a real negative.
Yeah, okay. It was great to see him back at the weekend. We wish him all the best and really hope that there is no more breakdowns. Is this the jammiest Triple Crown in the history of Triple Crowns?
Well, I want to ask you and Owen, and this was kind of been under my mind since the weekend, is what's your assessment of Wales now? And did you receive any credit for igniting the Welsh dragon to get him a Triple Crown?
Somebody asked me, it's between me and a couple of others for Warren Gatlin's selection for the Lions. I'm available if Warren needs me to go and help with motivational tactics.
You were the most hated men in Wales there for a couple of days.
They love us now.
You're quite popular now, yeah.
My point at the start of the tournament was Wales were in a bit of a shambles, and we needed to take that opportunity not to drag them into the deep water and bring that setup, the chaos that they had presided over the previous year. But we didn't do that. We had a man sent off, and obviously the rest is history. Scotland, playing really well against them, have a man sent off, and they win that game. And then England, I don't know what England were thinking. Even when they got back into the game and drew level in the second half, they were dropping passes, they were committing stupid errors at the breakdown, giving away penalties. It was a bizarre England performance.
It was, and Eddie Jones hasn't picked form players at the start of this tournament. I think he picked a lot of the Saracens players who were incredibly undercooked regarding match practice, and they haven't got up to speed, and they've shown that. And I thought Italy played really well against England at Twickenham, and England were really poor. They were really poor against Scotland the first game, and they showed glimpses and sparks of what they can do on Saturday against Wales. But they're not where we expected them to be at, England, and that's not taking that away from Wales. I think there was a couple of decisions in that game that very, very big controversial decisions. That quick penalty that Dan Biggar does a crossfield kick with Josh Adams. I think if I was one of the English players there, I'd feel very hard done by with that. They did spread out on one side, so maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. They should have been more alert to that. I thought it was a knock-on for Rhys Zammit. I tell you, it hit his hand. He runs past the ball. It hits the back of his leg. He didn't have control of the ball. I think there was 14 points there that in my opinion, shouldn't have been given. Wales would have kicked the penalty if they didn't do the crossfield kick. But so it's crazy to think where Wales are at, because what you said at the start was reality. And I've been speaking to Welsh people I know, played against, I was chatting to Scott Quinnell before the tournament, and Scott always puts a brave face on it, but they were very, very nervous about where they would end up in the Six Nations. And Wayne Pivac's job was on the line. I think if they had a bad Six Nations, he would have probably not survived. And it's incredible. It's all about creating that bit of luck, getting that bit of luck, then creating it and building on it. And I think they went out on Saturday after those first two games. You say, Ireland probably should have and could have beaten them with 14 men. Scotland should have beaten them, but they showed a lot of character there. And the word character comes into sport a lot. But they looked like a team on Saturday that was they got through that really rough period of maybe November and last year's Six Nations, and they've kind of crossed the line. They looked way more confident in what they were trying to do. And aside from those refereeing decisions, I thought they were outstanding with the way they played.
Their forwards were really good.
They were brilliant. And they deserve it now. And I think it's an incredible turnaround. They're probably a little bit shocked themselves, the Welsh public, but it just goes to show there's some brilliant Welsh players there, and they found form. And that's the point I was making about experience. Sometimes experience can reignite and leadership within a group, and that's what Wales have seemed to have done, and they were outstanding. But England and Eddie Jones I think he's made mistakes with the players he's picked. I think there's players who are not in the English squad who are probably playing week in, week out in the Premiership, and that's probably the angle he should have went at the start of this tournament.
It's bizarre that he didn't take that opportunity to make his depth chart much bigger and just say to the Saracens lads, go off, play some rugby, get promoted and get back into the Premiership, and you're all going to be part of my plans, don't worry about it. Like, in that case, he would then have...
Yeah, in hindsight, look, hindsight's a great thing, and if England had started off well, it beat Scotland and, you know, I think, and beat Wales at the weekend, they'd be the ones who were in the driving seat. But someone like Sam Simmonds for Exeter, and I think there's been calls for him for a couple of years, he's scoring tries every week now in the Premiership with Exeter, and he just doesn't get a look in. When you look at, you know, Billy Vunipola played better on Saturday, but I still think him and a number of Saracens guys just look undercooked.
Yeah.
They don't look as fit as they should be for international rugby. But England still did a lot of good things on Saturday, and I can guarantee you this, in 2 years' time in France, this won't have any bearing, because England will be strong again. They are a powerhouse, and they've incredible players. So it's a blip, and he will get criticism for it. And but it just goes to show that after the Scotland game, a lot of people were saying these players are not match fit, and they couldn't be. They haven't played rugby in 2 months, some of them, and they've lost form as well. And that's shown.
Good stuff, Alan. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
Alan Quinlan giving us his thoughts there. 6 minutes past 8. Good morning from a foggy New York City, says OW on YouTube. Johnny Kelly says Gordon Elliott might be bigger news, lads. We're going to talk about the Gordon Elliott news with Thom Malone in just a little while. Leinster cut Glasgow apart yesterday with an offloading game. If the second team can do it, the lads playing for Ireland can surely do it as well. If Irish backs could learn to plant a defender before passing, says Pascal Jacob, they'd be unstoppable. The rugby gods are Welsh, says John Gerard Healy, whose names are Davis. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And somebody wants Italy out and the Springboks in. That'll be an amazing tournament. If you can get rid of Italy and put the Springboks in, that would not be a bad annual rugby tournament. 7 minutes past 8. A packed show still to come here on OTBAM. Football with Brian Kerr and David Meyler. We're talking Gordon Elliott with Thom Malone. Up next, though, we're going to cross to Perth to catch up with former Irish Rugby international Rob Kearney, who made his Super Rugby debut at Western Force last weekend.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Saturday panel on OTB.
And I find myself during commentary, sometimes a thread will appear in my mind and it'll be like a worm. You know, it's there. I know this might happen and I've got it ready to go. And that would have been the nation holds its breath thing, because I couldn't have scripted that penalty in Genoa in 1990. And it just came to me in the moment. But it came to me because of all that I had done beforehand. And it was there ready to emerge at the right moment.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, study the form with our Racing Post Spotlight before watching the action with free live streaming on all UK and Irish horse races. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
Tom Watson, you're welcome to Golf Weekly.
Hey, this is going to be fun.
Very happy to say European captain and, of course, 3-time major winner Padraig Carrington joins us.
Today's special guest on Golf Weekly is Lee Westwood.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm honoured and delighted.
Let's bring in Paul McGinley, who joins us now. Paul, you're very welcome.
Shane Lowry, how are you keeping?
I'm good, thanks, yeah. Well, I'm as good as I can be.
The biggest names in golf and Ireland's best golf podcast, Golf Weekly, now exclusively available on Patreon. Go to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly to sign up now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
9 minutes past 8 this morning. Let's head off to sunny Australia and join Rob Kearney. Rob, good evening to you. How are you?
Good, thanks, Ger. How are things?
Yeah, good. Life's a bit more normal, I think, for you guys than it is. I'm not sure what the lockdown situation is like in Perth at the moment.
No. Life is very normal. We went into a 5-day snap lockdown. They had one case, and they cleared it after the 5 days. We couldn't leave home, and everyone was wearing masks. They thought it was the strangest thing that has ever happened to them. Little did they know everything that's going on back home.
You've picked the best time in the world to go off to Australia to play rugby, it turns out.
Yeah, like I've just been so blessed, and you feel a little bit sort of guilty by being over here and having such fun when, you know, all my family and friends are going through what they are back home. But, you know, it really couldn't have worked out any better for me, to be honest.
And so as a result, you're definitely not sharing anything on Instagram to make everybody feel like they're missing out on stuff.
Well, I've been doing it a couple of times, and I must say I'm getting a bit of hate back from people, and there's been probably a fair few more unfollows than there has been to follow. But yeah, I'm a little bit mindful of not posting too much stuff.
What's the rugby been like so far from that perspective? How are you playing versus how you thought you would be playing after a period of time away from the game?
Yeah, not too bad. Like, I played my first game 2 weeks ago and got through a full 80 minutes, which I was probably most concerned about. I hadn't played a game for 7 months, and then I finished up at Leinster in September, and then I didn't really have a team to do any team training with or ball work for 4 months until I got over there in January, and then got thrown in pretty quickly. So I think just to get through the 80 minutes was a big plus for me.
Mic'd up as well. That's a unique and new experience.
Yeah, I'd actually done it a few times before. Sky Sports used to do it in the league, but I think the difference this time was they waited 4 or 5 days to compile all the information and get the best bits, whereas Sky tried to do it during the game, and it probably didn't work as well, trying to censor all the language and all of that stuff and get it out 20 minutes after they'd captured it. Did
they give you an option to say, no, please don't put that bit out? Are you in any way asked, is that okay, is that not okay?
No, I wasn't, and I was a little bit concerned because I said a few things that I wouldn't have been not happy about coming out, but even people in trucks or the cutters as they're known, there was a few things that I was a little bit concerned about, but thankfully everything that came out I was happy enough with.
Have you just managed to slot straight in as a vocal leader, Rob? Has that come easy to you going down to that team and I guess slotting in as a new guy, but also the experienced head?
Yeah, I think, it has a little bit. And one of the things with this group is, and I've told them this already, that maybe just they're a little bit quiet. There's a lot of young guys and lacking a little bit of leadership. And, the coach, it was one thing that he said that he wanted me to bring when I was coming in. And I think when you're coming into a new environment, if you can bring that early on within the first few weeks, it's easier to, it's almost expected of you a little bit then. So it was a role that I was happy enough to take up.
It's an interesting conversation because we've been thinking about that in an Irish context over the last few weeks about when young players actually manage to take the step up and become leaders. When did you find that was the case for you, that as a rugby player you had the self-confidence to say, I can actually bark orders at my teammates here?
Yeah, do you know what? It always comes with, you have to be backing it up on the field. And, as a young guy, as soon as you start to put more and more good performances together, you're limiting your errors is another big one, because it's really hard to bark and give out to all other 14 players on the field if you're slipping up and making some simple errors at times too. So, it definitely is, for me, it was something when I was younger that the more international games you start playing and the better performances you're putting together, the more of I suppose a right you have then to try and lead.
Does it help when you have coaches who are saying you're doing really well, continue to do this, or is it all on you? Is it all on the player, Rob, to actually say, I'm confident now, I have the capabilities of actually being a leader and a vocal one at that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an onus on the coach to spur you on a little bit and say, listen, we need you to start stepping up into this leadership role. Coaches are very good nowadays that they'll pinpoint maybe 4 or 5 younger guys who they see as potential leaders or future captains of the club and whatnot. And they they give them a little bit more onus to share their opinion and to speak up in meetings and things like that. And that is something that an awful lot of coaches will do. Like I say, they'll pinpoint 4 or 5 younger guys and just slowly, nurture them through the years.
Rob, was it always your intention to have some time at the end of your career where you played away from Ireland, or did you want to be a one-club player? What was behind the decision to move?
Do you know what? I'd never thought too much about it. Certainly back at the end of last season, July, August time, I was very much resigned to the fact that I was going to finish up in September. There was no contract there for me at Leinster, and I'd very much come to terms with that because, I've been so lucky with what I've achieved in rugby and how many years I've been able to play professionally at the one club. I think last last year and the year before were pretty unfulfilling for me in terms of, not getting picked for, obviously missing out in that Ireland squad and then losing my place at Leinster and, not getting any sort of a sign off with empty stadiums and crowds. So, it came around quite quickly and, it's one of the best decisions I've made so far. I'm having the time of my life.
Is it the type of thing that could extend, that actually maybe you go on a bit of a world tour now and think, why wouldn't I do something like this? You look at, say, Dan Carter's officially retired just now, but he did play a long time at the end of his career, did travel a good bit, did see other rugby cultures, and I can see the attraction of that.
Yeah, there definitely is a huge attraction. I think my eyes have definitely been opened up to, the big bad world outside of Dublin that there is. And, I've been so energized by joining a new club and meeting new people and coaches and everything that comes with that and trying to reestablish yourself a little bit. And also, it was definitely challenging for me. I never thought I'd be playing super rugby at 34 years of age. And, it's still early days. Like I said, I played 80 minutes. I knew all about it for the Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday after the game. So we'll see how the body goes over the next few months.
Is coaching something that might not have been on your radar and all of a sudden you go and you travel and you see other things and think, actually, I could do that?
Yeah, you're bang on there. When I was back in Ireland, it was something that I never thought that I'd have been overly interested in. I think when you come away to a new country and a new club, it's only just sort of dawned on me how much I've learned off some amazing coaches. So Michael Cheika, Joe Schmidt, and Stuart Lancaster, the three big coaches I've had probably in my career. I've learned a huge amount off them. And when you come into a new environment and you give your point of view and I suppose your philosophy of how you see the game going, you can add an awful lot of value. And that's something that I didn't think I'd be able to do as much as I am.
The difference between the game in the Northern and the Southern Hemisphere is something that Ronan O'Gara would talk about quite a lot, particularly their intention to attack and when people intend to attack versus, well, let's just kick the ball and see how the territory is going to go here. What's that been like, and is that even different from Australia, from New Zealand as well? I know you played one game, so it's very early, but the stuff that you're watching and what you're hearing in training.
Yeah, I think the New Zealanders are definitely taking that to a different level, but it is all very much all-out attack, and the amount of ball and play is a little bit higher, and the speed of running, the amount of running that you do, I think I covered maybe 8.5K in that game 2 weeks ago, which I wouldn't have covered in any game over the last few years. So there's definitely an awful lot more running in it. There's an awful lot more high-speed running, which was probably the biggest area of difference that I would have known from back home.
And then the skills, obviously, is there a difference in the skill set? I'm not saying that they're more skilled or less skilled, but they just have different types of skills, or is it essentially still the same game, it's just played with a different intention?
Yeah, it's still the same game. There's definitely more, you're encouraged to take a lot more risks. If you throw the ball and it doesn't come off, it's not really too much of a worry to the coaches. They want you to try all of that sort of stuff. Now, you might not get away with it at international level, but certainly in the games that I've seen and been involved in, that they don't really care as much about mistakes, and you're encouraged to take those 60-40 chances, whereas back home you'd be encouraged not to take a 50-50. Now, in saying that, the dry ball and the conditions does make a huge difference. When you're playing with wet balls and greasy balls, it does make it an awful lot harder to try and play that type of game.
When you were playing in Ireland, Rob, who was the coach that made you fear giving that 50-50 pass the most?
Oh, what a loaded question, good man. I think, listen, Joe was very much dead set in terms of how he wanted to play the game. The less errors, the better. You hold on to the ball, you get good, quick ruck speed, and you put enough pressure on the opposition, you try and get tries from it. And that's just a different philosophy that coaches have, would be my answer on that one.
Because again, this is something that we've been speaking about as well over the last few weeks. This sort of, not fear, but this perceived maybe lack of ability to throw the offload, which kind of stems from maybe the way players are thinking about the game, that it's clearly not a technical issue with Irish players. The players, as they showed against Italy at the weekend, are well able to do it. What are the players thinking when those conversations are happening about Ireland not having an offloading game, for example?
Well, I can't tell you what the players are thinking in there at the moment. I'm a couple of years out of the environment, but from my own perspective, what I will say is that international rugby is tense, and it's pretty suffocating, and one error or one loose offload can go the other length of the field, and it's a big turning point. And I think it's very much the way Ireland have played over the last number of years is, it is a little bit conservative, but you hold on to the ball, you wear the opposition down, and you build your points that way. I think Ireland played really well at the moment. We saw an awful lot more attacking from them and in turn offloads, and hopefully that's something that they can bring into the next 2 weeks.
Do we get a little bit too hung up on the idea of offloads? Do we look at that statistic and say Ireland aren't showing creativity in attack when actually maybe there is, but just in a different method or not including offloads?
Yeah, I think it's definitely one stat that, if Ireland lose the game, that people latch onto that stat and say, oh, well, that's why we've lost the game. Where, there'll be so many times down through the years that Ireland would have won a lot of big games and thrown very few offloads. I think it's when we get to games that we haven't won, like I say, and that seems to be a stat that jumps out of people an awful lot of the time. And definitely, I do think that it is something that we get a little bit hung up on. The offload is definitely something that is easier to do when you're a big man or woman winning the contact, winning the collision, and getting your hands free. And I think Ireland are always going to be in that nation where, we're not going to be able to bash the opposition just from sheer size, and that's going to be something that we're always going to have to deal with.
The conservative philosophy you talked about there, is that something that the players are happy enough to do when it's winning? And so for a long time under Joe, we were winning games. There were tight games, and there wasn't a whole heap of offloads. But because the style is successful, and ultimately professional sports people get into sport and they need to win, that's just how that evolved over a period of a number of years. And there was never really a question of, well, hang on a second now, in the long term, is this the right thing for us?
Yeah, you're dead right. The bottom line is always winning. And, you'll play whatever type of game that the coach is telling you to play, or the type of game that you want to play, if it's getting you the win at the other end. And that's just the bottom line, not just in rugby, but in all sports. You do whatever it takes to have to win. Now the Scots and the English will definitely serve up different types of defences. They'll be stronger defensively. And like I say, hopefully Ireland can bring a little bit of that style of rugby they played into the weekend, into the next few weeks.
I'm not sure how much Ireland you've watched over the last few weeks. What's your take on how that back three in particular is going?
Yeah, I think they're going really well. It's been a bit of a funny Six Nations. You look at Wales and everyone is wondering how they've gotten there. Ireland obviously had that tough start when they played most of the game with 14 men. The French game was a little bit of a kick-a-thon due to the conditions, and then at the weekend I think was the first time that they finally started to express themselves as the team and played some really good attacking rugby. Now, albeit against Italy, there will be bigger challenges over the next few weeks. But the back three have gone pretty well there. Hugo's probably been the standout performer. He looks really comfortable and confident in that position. And, so they've been doing really good.
What do you see in Hugo Keenan's performances that impress you the most?
Well, for me as a fullback, it's always solidity first and foremost, and you want to give all the guys in front of you that assurance and calmness that you're going to be able to shovel up all the shite that when it comes up the other end. His sevens background is something that is definitely standing to him. He's unbelievably fit, and he's quick. He's got some good top speed, and he demonstrated that at the weekend. And he's only going to grow more and more into that position the more he gets to play it.
The bit where it seems like when Ireland, certainly over the last kind of 5 or 6 months before it became nailed on that Hugo Keane was going to be the fullback, where it was basically anybody who plays in the wing can also play fullback. What did you make of that? Because it seems like it's quite a specialist position, and maybe we underrated just how difficult it is to switch between those positions.
Yeah, I think it's something that has definitely been not undervalued, but people just weren't so sure as to the differences between wing and fullback. They're very different positions. You can't take a winger, throw him in fullback, and then hope that he just becomes a natural fullback after a few games. There's definitely different levels of skill set that you need to be able to perform. You need to have a good understanding of reading the game, which is something that's really important. And like I say, a lot of the time it comes back to limiting errors, and sometimes people don't necessarily like that conservative approach. But your fullback, more often than not, needs to be someone who doesn't make too many errors.
Ultimately, that's the bit, isn't it? That's the tension between you want to make sure that we don't get beaten in this game, give ourselves a chance to win it, and then the creative responsibility should be shared amongst the whole 15 players, as opposed to, well, one of those 2 players or one of those 3 players in the back 3, let them have a little bit of magic, because there's no system there. Over the period of time, the opposition are going to be able to close down your back 3 if that's where all of your attacking threat is going to come from.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sort of a big believer that big games, when it gets to those crunch moments in the last 5, 6, 7 minutes, games are generally won on a team making a big mistake, as opposed to one individual producing an outrageous moment of magic. Now, I might be wrong in saying that, but that is definitely a philosophy that I've had over the last number of years. And, the more guys you have in the team who will ensure that when those clutch moments come in the last 5, 6 minutes, that they're not going to make big mistakes, the more chance you will have of winning the game. Because
I think a lot of people would just assume that how Leinster win their games is with that kind of offloading, free running, but if you look back at, say, the Champions Cup final in Bilbao, that was a clutch game that was won by a mistake from the opposition, and Leinster not making that many mistakes, and that was 2 of the best teams in World Rugby at that point, Leinster against Racing. And I guess if you look back at the All Blacks winning their World Cup, maybe the one that ended their famine when they beat France in it was a single point game at that stage, and they didn't give away a penalty. Maybe they should have, but they're the type of games that you're actually talking about, as opposed to we need to be playing football like Brazil, essentially. Exactly, and I think sometimes we get lost a little bit in watching games throughout the season, league games that Leinster play, and some of these games are over after 30 minutes. It's not until you get to quarter-final levels of Europe and into your big international games when all of these things become more important. There's so many games during the season that what we're talking about isn't relevant, because games are won after 40, 50, 60 minutes. So it's definitely when you get to those higher stake games that what we're talking about now becomes more pertinent, I think. You've got the Waratahs on Friday. How are you fixed for that?
Yeah, good. Travel to Sydney on Wednesday. The Waratahs just came off the back of their biggest ever defeat to the Brumbies. I think they were beaten 60 points to 10 or something. Now the Western Force we had a difficult year last year, 0 from 8, and lost our first game to the Brumbies last week. So we're very much desperately in search of a win. And, the Waratahs will be hurting now a little bit this week. They'll be questioning themselves in their own camp. So hopefully this is the week that we get the first W, as they call them down here. Well, listen, best of luck with it. And thanks a million for talking to us this morning, Rob. Cheers. Good stuff, lads. Thanks. Rob Kearney giving us some thoughts there from sunny Australia, where life is free and you can go out and do what you want. 29 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTBAM. If you want to get in touch with us, 0879 180 180 is the number. A reminder, of course, OTBAM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. I'll run you through the newspaper headlines.
Gordon Elliott apology. Trainer apologises for any offence caused. We'll get into that story in just a moment. Brian Kerr believes Roy Keane's analysis is too rash. Sheffield United against Liverpool last night. Liverpool won 2-0. Adrian started. No Diego Jota in the squad just yet either. So here are the newspaper headlines. Angry United accused referee. Shaw claims Atwell rejected penalty appeal to avoid post-match talk. We haven't talked about referees just yet, but the refereeing scenario in all sports all weekend wasn't great. Itoje singled out, says Jones, and trainer posed on dead horse. That is Gordon Elliott. We're going to get to that story in just a moment, and we'll show you the picture that has caused such consternation as well. Front page of the Irish Times is that Gordon Elliott story. Gordon Elliott apologises for image of him sitting on top of dead horse. Sorry, not in front of, but on top of dead horse. Plenty for Farrell and Co to ponder after a restorative visit to Rome. And rivals have turned referees against Manchester United, says Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So it's the mind games have ratcheted up. Reds stop the rot is the lead on the Irish Independent. Picture of Bobby Firmino turning around, celebrating. Liverpool rediscovered cutting edge to draw a line under Nightmare Month. Maybe it is a line drawn, who knows? Maybe that's all they needed, some kind of weird turnaround for them to happen. The back page of the Daily Mirror, handball, BAWL. Furious Ole, refs are too scared to give us any more penalty decisions. It might be true, but on the front of the Mirror is the image of Gordon Elliott sitting on top of that dead horse. I'm sorry, top trainer sits on dead horse. Gordon Elliott apologises as he admits photo is real. There was definitely a campaign on Twitter yesterday to try and make it seem as if that wasn't a real photograph, but Gordon Elliott has said it is a real photograph. Stu, what? I can't give a pen for that. It would be too controversial. This is apparently what Luke Shaw has been told by the referee in the middle of the game yesterday. So I don't know. Did he actually? I mean, he must have said it. So back at the Star, we're still cop notch. Get it on? Cop notch, top notch. Get it? Roy takes aim at Doherty. That's the beef is real story that we've been speaking about. And Robbie's Rovers return. There he is in Shamrock Rovers gear on the bench in Tallaght for the pre-season friendly. Off his own back, he's saying, so it doesn't look like it's a done deal that he's going to be part of that coaching ticket. Maybe he might just help out. Solskjaer and penalty call fury, says the Telegraph. And happy as Larry, new GAA Prez McCarthy on the split season, media rights and new beginnings. So we haven't talked about it, but the professional foul essentially came in hurling, right, over the weekend. The Irish Daily Mail, I am so sorry, Elliott apology for sitting on dead horse. Right, Thom Malone is with us. We'll run you through the rest of the newspapers here. Tom, good morning to you. How are you?
Hi, Ger. I'm not great, to be perfectly honest. Well, I'm sickened.
Well, look, let's talk about it, because, and I just want to give a fair warning to anybody that we are going to show the image, which is on the front of the newspapers today, that has caused so much consternation. And Tom, before I get your reaction, I just want to give everybody as much information as I possibly can. So I'm going to read this statement from Gordon Elliott that came out last night. I'd like to address the speculation and rumours that have been rife since an old photo of me began circulating on social media yesterday afternoon. Firstly, I apologise profoundly for any offence that this photo has caused, and can categorically state that the welfare of each and every horse under my care is paramount and has been central to the success we have enjoyed here at Cullentraw. The photo in question was taken some time ago and occurred after a horse had died of an apparent heart attack in the gallops. I appreciate that an initial viewing of this photo suggests it is a callous and staged photo, but nothing could be further from the truth. What was a sad time, which it is when any horse under my care passes away, my initial reaction was to get the body removed from where it was positioned. I was standing over the horse waiting to help with the removal of the body, in the course of which, to my memory, I received a call, and without thinking, I sat down to take it. Hearing a shout from one of my team, I gestured to wait until I was finished. Such background information may seem trivial at this time, and will not allay the concerns of many people both within and outside the world of horse racing. However, I feel it's important to provide people with some context surrounding this photo to the racing community, to anyone who has worked with and loves horses, and to anyone offended by this image. I cannot apologise enough. Horse welfare and the care and attention to detail involved is absolutely at the core of everything we do here, and both myself and all the team pride ourselves on those standards. Again, I apologise for any offence caused and ask people to consider this statement as opposed to the various falsehoods and misinformation being circulated on social media. This time I'd like to stress that I continue to extend my full cooperation with the ongoing IHRB investigation. Tom, you're involved in racing, you've ride out, you've been covering racing, you've been part of the industry for your whole life essentially. what was your take when you saw the photograph first, and when you've kind of seen this happen and over the last 24 hours or so, and Gordon Elliott's apology last night?
When I actually saw this photo first, probably about last week, it was going around a little bit on sort of some WhatsApp groups and the like, and my reaction to it between then and now in the sort of 6 or 7 days since hasn't changed a sec. It hasn't changed a jot. I just think it's absolutely disgusting. It's very, very difficult for people to see that photo and not change their perception of the person in it, and the way they think of the animals that they work with every single day. And that's a massive problem really for racing, as far as I can see, because, you know, when we look to sell this sport to people who are not that familiar with it, one of the key aspects is the love individuals have of their horses and the lengths they will go to keep them sound, to resuscitate them, to find the root in every single problem. And the notion that you just absent-mindedly sitting them to take a phone call immediately after they passed away is completely the opposite to all of that.
It's the tension, really, I think, that exists there. These are work animals, and you know, they're ridden hard to win races, and yet certainly the industry always likes to tell us about the level and duty of care that they have to the animals.
Yeah, and look, there is one aspect to this, is that, I mean, you know, Gordon Elliott has not done anything wrong to the animal while it was alive, and that's probably quite clear to say. You know, there's no element of cruelty or anything like that. There's like this horse, like horses have heart issues regularly. That is, you know, it's something that happens. They're worked, as you said, they are working animals, and I guess, you know, that is an aspect of maybe horse racing that needs to be communicated more, and it's something that Mark Prescott I spoke about in a recent interview, that distance that is becoming between the general public and the concept of a working animal, you know, is an issue for society. But again, it's that image and that notion that immediately after a horse has passed, you would just absent-mindedly sit on it to take a phone call, which definitely, you know, jars with a lot of, you know, what we would like to think people think of their horses. And look, I've been in touch with trainers. I've been in touch with people who work in the industry, and there is a widespread horror at this image. I can tell you that for nothing.
The London Times, in the back page of their newspaper, which obviously it's not the Times Ireland edition anymore. This is the London paper. They're saying that if the image is genuine, Elliott could have his licence withdrawn. It's within the gift of the racing authorities to withdraw a licence immediately, pending an investigation, should the case be deemed sufficiently serious. And so it's not just the Irish horse racing body, the IHRB, they're investigating, but their British counterparts have said that they've asked to be kept abreast of this, because obviously Gordon Elliott is going to be one of the dominant trainers at Cheltenham in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, as we spoke about last Thursday, Gordon Elliott is going to send approximately 56 horses to Cheltenham in what will be 2 weeks tomorrow. So, you know, he has been top trainer at the meeting in the past. So, you know, he will be one of their, if you think there are four main players at Cheltenham, there are really three over the last couple of years: Willie Mullins, Nicky Henderson, Gordon Elliott. They are the big three trainers that dominate Cheltenham and have done for the last 4 or 5 years. So yes, the BHA are going to be kept very much abreast of what goes on with the IHRB. The IHRB said on Saturday night that they are launching an immediate investigation. They've said since as well that they want it to be wrapped up quickly. The problem here is, I think this falls into the rules of the, you know, the integrity of racing, as in the image of racing. I was kind of looking through the rules last night. It's fairly far down, but it is something that can, you know, obviously incur a significant penalty, which, you know, it could be right up to a suspension of your license or the like. So there is a real danger for Gordon Elliott here that, you know, a really, really big punishment could be meted out for this. The problem really is that we don't really know what the IHRB will do punishment-wise, because, you know, up until the Charles Burns case, so many of their punishments have been you know, there is a very little. They don't show their homework. You know what I mean? They don't show their workings before the Charles Brown's case. So, we don't really know how they decide on what punishment is real and what's just written on the back of a beer mat. So we don't know what that's going to be. There's a massive appetite for Gordon Elliott's head on a plate, but then again, that's a social media reaction, and that's probably not real either. I imagine yesterday Gordon Elliott got in touch with all of his owners, hopefully to come up with a better apology than he issued to the public. But it's intriguing what will happen next, whether he will lose horses over this, whether he'll lose owners over this, because you can't just take a horse out of a yard. Like if you, the horses that are going to run in Cheltenham in 2 weeks' time, they've been in Gordon Elliott's care for several years at this stage. I mean, it'd be interesting to see if horses do at this stage of the season take horses out of his yard. I would say it's much more likely that maybe if people are going to make a decision, they'll do so maybe towards the end of the season, or perhaps decide that they will, do it maybe later, or maybe not send them horses next year or something like that. But it'll be intriguing to see what happens next. But you'd imagine Gordon Elliott has been in touch. He's obviously said he's been in touch with the IHRB. He's held his hands up, and he's obviously, I'd imagine he's been in touch with his owners as well. I'm sure one or two of them were certainly not impressed at what they saw over the course of the weekend.
Tommy, is there a cold relationship that almost exists here between trainers and those involved in horse racing and the horses themselves? So does that exist in racing at every level, or is this an outlier?
I mean, horses dropping dead on the gallops is not a regular occurrence, but it happens. And, you have to bear in mind, Gordon Elliott has run more horses than anyone else. Like, Willie Mullins this year has had something like 660 odd runners so far this year. Gordon Elliott has had nearly 1,100. So it's the sheer volume of horses that he deals with. And therefore, yes, there will be a certain coldness towards animals getting injured, because when you're in the care of upwards of 400 animals, accidents will happen. And like I say, thoroughbreds are, they're flight animals. They will get spooked. They will have heart issues. They will, run through a fence and break themselves up. And, unfortunately, they have to be euthanized when serious injuries occur that are unfortunately all too regular. So yes, there is a certain coldness and detachment that you have to be able to get on with your job, especially, if you lose a horse one day, if you lose a horse in the first lot, it's probably going to affect you. But Gordon Elliott still has, 400 other horses to take care of. And I'm not saying he won't, it will be very upsetting, but there has to be an element of detachment, just because, I'm not saying it's a regular occurrence, but these things do happen. And I don't think you can kind of let it stop you in your tracks for a massive amount of time where it affects the other aspects of your work. Because Gordon Elliott's like the CEO of a very large company that has many, many, many workers. And while losing horses would be very upsetting, it's such an enormous organization. I imagine he doesn't really have too much time to dwell on it or get that upset about it. And, it's like I said, losing a horse is a very, very sad thing for a bigger trainer, but it is a probably all too regular occurrence for them as well.
It's horse racing itself is going to have the issue with the problems around the public relations around this as well. Particularly, we're building up to Cheltenham, and then after that comes the Grand National, and they had to change the Grand National fences because the race was unsafe. So, there's a million different aspects to this story which are going to have to get teased out. And I think it's interesting that the British authorities are putting pressure on the Irish authorities because they want to be seen to do that. And it's easy for them to do that because they're not the ones who will ultimately be issuing any sanction. But your instinct sounds to me, Tom, like there'll be a fine as opposed to a suspension. Is that kind of the...
I would imagine a fine. This is quite a modern problem that requires, a sort of swift resolution, which is not the way the IHRB. It's not a situation that would suit the IHRB's decision-making policies as they have been in the past. Normally, the Charles Brown's affair took over 2 years to bear itself out. And Charles Brown still hasn't been suspended. He's a winner yesterday. So, you're talking about timelines and how things get sorted out by the IHRB. A very modern problem like an offensive photograph shared on social media, it's not the kind of situation they'll have a lot of precedent for coming up with a punishment for Gordon Elliott. So I would imagine it will be fine. Again, you have to think of some of the other bad things that have happened recently in racing and what those kind of punishments have been. And I would imagine it will be a fine. And it's sort of up to Gordon Elliott. It's just such an awful time for Gordon Elliott. You talk about the BHA. I mean, the BHA's time when they really just have to get in the bunker in British horse racing is March and April, when it's coming up to a year since the coronavirus pandemic started. Cheltenham was an absolute touch point for that. And then the Grand National is always a focal point for the kind of anti-horse racing lobby that exists quite more vocally in the UK than it does in Ireland. So the BHA would just want these 6 weeks to pass without incident whatsoever, so they can just get to the end of the Grand National without any major incidents. And now this has thrown them just the most enormous headache, and there will be huge pressure on the IHRB to make a very swift decision on it.
It's on the front page of the tabloids, it's on the back page of the London Times, so it's not a great look. Tom, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thom Malone giving us some thoughts there. It's 8:46 a.m. this morning here on OTBAM. A reminder about what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. 1 o'clock, it is an amazing racing story. Centaur, the story of Declan Murphy, the jockey who recovered from a horrific brain injury caused in a race. And basically had to learn to walk again. A State of the Union at 3 o'clock, Keith Wood's State of the Union. The Split Season, Episode 1 from 4 o'clock. OTB Gold, Dr. Harry Edwards talking about O.J. Simpson at 6. It's a brilliant interview with Harry Edwards about the O.J. Simpson documentary. And then live tonight, looking back at a tasty enough weekend of sport. David Moyle is going to join us just before 9 o'clock as we get stuck into the weekend's football. Right now, they're going to hear from Brian Kerr, who joined Nathan yesterday for live commentary of Burnley's 4-0 defeat to Spurs.
Well, Brian, a rare, comfortable afternoon for Tottenham. 2 goals for Gareth Bale. Is he back?
Well, he played very well today. I think he obviously did enough in the second half last week against West Ham to convince José Mourinho that he deserved a starting place. He hasn't done enough before now, that's for sure. I would concur with José Mourinho that he hasn't looked good enough, hasn't looked enthusiastic or brave or strong in possession in the earlier games he's played, be it the FA Cup, the Europa League, the League Cup matches, or even the other occasion when he's played in the team in the Premier League. But he certainly did the stuff today. Got off to a good start, was a fairly simple goal, but he played well. His all-round game was good, and he worked reasonably hard for the team on the defensive side. There was no huge threat from Burnley, so it was quite an easy game for Spurs as it went on. But I think he did enough to start in the next game against Fulham.
Does everyone just need to readjust their expectations around Bale? Because a lot goes back to those final couple of seasons at Spurs where he's electric, and then how he kicked on at Real Madrid, winning 4 Champions League titles. Do we just have to accept that Gareth Bale ain't ever coming back?
Well, I think people are having to adjust to that. I mean, certainly I felt that Gareth Bale could make a major impact back at Spurs. Our understanding of what happened at Real Madrid in the last couple of seasons where he was underused, he still got a reasonable number of goals in each of the seasons when he played games. Our understanding was that that they weren't looking after him very well, and he'd become someone who they wanted to move on, and that he wasn't doing the stuff at the level they wanted from him. But that, the feeling was if he got back up and playing, there's someone with a team and a manager who believed in him, he would do it. But you're looking at his performances since the start of this season, you're starting to think, well, now I can understand why Zinedine Zidane wanted him off the books, that he wasn't playing well enough and that he didn't seem like he was really committed to doing the work in the game that's required of someone that's on the wage bill at a major club in the world. I mean, the first thing you're looking for off any player is graft and effort and commitment. And he didn't. Was
that an attitude thing, or is that a fitness? Because he was such, his athleticism was such a key part of what made him so great.
It's hard to believe that is a athleticism and his physical ability would have declined so much that after a few months back in England, under the guidance of what you would think would be expert medical and strength and conditioning people, that he wouldn't have been in shape prior to now, which we're at the end of February. It's really hard to understand that. So there has to be some part of it that's his mental attitude and his overall well-being that had gone so far that it's taken 7-8 months into the season for him to get into the shape where he can start in the first team in a match of significance. I find it hard to believe, but today's evidence seems to be that the ability is still there, and that if his physical well-being is in a good place, that he can do it. Now it was against Burnley, but lots of teams struggle against Burnley, and he seemed to be right at it today, and seemed to be no bother to him, and he gave Taylor a hard day, and he also, all the defenders had a hard time indeed with him when he got on the ball.
Spurs desperately needed that win. They'd lost 5 of the previous 6. They've been in complete free fall. And historically, when we've seen that from a Mourinho team, he hasn't been able to stop the rod. He hasn't been able to turn it round. The attacking talent that Tottenham have, with Bale now part of it, Son, Kane, do you give them any chance of finishing inside the top 4 this season, which I guess would be success?
I give them a chance, but I don't think they'll make it. They're 6 points off with a game in hand on West Ham. But the problem for them is that they are not just behind West Ham, they're behind Aston Villa, Everton, Liverpool, Chelsea, probably leaving out somebody else there. But, there's a lot of teams. Leicester are obviously up there already. They're in 3rd place, Manchester United 2nd, West Ham 4th. There's a lot of teams in contention for those places who have more points than Spurs at the moment, have been more consistent, and have just as much reason for as Tottenham have for wanting to finish in the top 4. So I give them a chance, but I think that the likelihood of them appearing in the Champions League next year is more likely to come from the Europa League. But that's not going to be easy either, even if they be Dynamo Zagreb, who'll be difficult options. There's good teams left. I think they'd be happy that Milan and Manchester United were drawn against each other, but there are other good teams still in that competition.
We've seen a lot of Tottenham this season, and I think back to the day of the North London derby where they beat Arsenal, were top of the Premier League, and at that stage you're looking back in the Brighton game and the West Ham game and thinking, well, if they'd won the 2 of those that they should have won, they could have been well clear at the top. What's gone wrong since then?
Well, I never thought that was built on a very solid foundation, that they got to the top of the league. They lost the early game, first game with Everton. After that, they went on a bit of a run. They were fortunate against Manchester United. Manchester United had the Martial put off in the first half, and they exploited that, and they won convincingly 6-1. But there was a lot of the other games, I felt that, even the Arsenal game, Manchester City, where it was built on, they got a goal, they got a break, and they sat in and defended well. And I didn't think that was going to stand up to the test of time and more games against other opposition who would get the breakthrough. And that has proved to be the case. What's gone wrong? I think is an over-reliance on defensive football, where they tried to fall into a comfort zone of getting the first goal in the match, trying to sit on that lead, being found out. Confidence drains them when the opposition get a goal. Sometimes they've got 1 point from the game, other times they've been beaten, but they can't really have much complaint. They haven't been good enough, they haven't been consistent enough. The goalkeeper and the centre-backs have been brittle, I would say.
So is it a players' issue? Because
it's a
Roy
combination
Keane was on Sky before the game and seemed quite adamant that take Kane and Son out of that team and there's nobody else getting anywhere near one of the top 4.
Look, that's too rash of an analysis. It's not a detailed analysis. If you look at the players they have in comparison, I think to the squad that somebody like Aston Villa has, or Everton, or Leicester even. I think Spurs have easily a comparable squad. I mean, you could say Leicester's front man, Maddison and Vardy, would compare to Son and Kane, but I think we'd put Son and Kane ahead of them. And all around the pitch, I think they've almost got 2 players for every position around the pitch. They're comparable to, I would say, everybody bar Manchester City at the moment, maybe even Manchester United. So I don't think the manager has got the best use out of the players. I think the players don't have confidence in the style of play that's been promoted as what's best for them, for the club. And as a result of that, they have lost far too many games once again. And I don't think the manager has got the best out of the players he has at the club, and I would put it down to the manager as much as I'd put it to the players.
Brian Kerr there talking with Nathan in the aftermath of that 4-0 win yesterday for Spurs. And the rebirth of Gareth Bale, is he back or what's going on? Is this a bit where we all look back and go, oh yeah, Gareth Bale had a really great end to his career and we can pinpoint these couple of weeks where or is it just something different? If you want to get in touch this morning, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the number. And delighted to say David Meyler is here with us. David, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, lads.
Is there any hope for Gareth Bale having another couple of seasons where he gets back to being somebody who's capable of doing what he was doing yesterday? Or what's going on with Gareth Bale?
Well, I think the big thing with Gareth Bale is there's always been question marks over his fitness and the injuries he's picked up, whether or not he'd be the same player. I think in the last, 4 goals in his last 4 games. We saw his performance yesterday, albeit Burnley weren't that a lot. Certainly, look, there's still a player inside there. It's just, we're used to seeing Gareth Bale, this explosive kind of, where he play on the wing or as a fullback going back years. He always had that burst of pace. And then the question marks were, does he still have that pace? Does he have that acceleration to get away from players? We're seeing glimpses of it now. Maybe it's just a case for him that he needs, a lot of games to kind of get himself up to kind of match fitness. He's probably been training the whole time. But if Spurs can get him to continue this form he's in, then that's only a plus for them. Because obviously yesterday's performance was very good, but albeit the opposition weren't up to much and, Burnley were very disappointing.
Are Spurs any good?
They're too hot and cold for me. It's a case of they're either very good and put in an outstanding performance, or they're just kind of all over the place at the back. Whether it be Alvaro, Sanchez, Aurier, or right back, there's kind of a mistake looming. And then with Lloris, sometimes he's just not on it. That's the reason why they're 8th in the table, and they're not pushing on the door for the Champions League spots. They're just too inconsistent.
Debate around that Champions League spots was probably the genesis for Jamie Redknapp versus Roy Keane yesterday. You look at that front 4 though, Lucas Moura in behind Kane's son, Gareth Bale. That is 100% an attack that should be contending for a title, never mind actually being in the top 4, right?
They say forwards win you games, defences win you championships. When you're talking about going for the title, you need a squad of 18 to 21 players, 22 players, whatever it may be, to be able to. The prime example is look at Liverpool's defence, in the sense that they've not been able to keep players fit, and that's why they've struggled. Albeit, I know the forwards haven't fired in games, but when you're speaking about Spurs, Harry Kane's world class, Heung-min Son's world class. There's no doubt in that. Gareth Bale, we still have question marks. That's why you asked me the first opening question, is whether or not can he continue this form. There's no doubting that he has been an incredible, player over the last few years, especially with Real Madrid and the Champions League wins and that. Lucas Moura, you look at, is he up to their level? Probably not, no, but he's certainly, the next level down below them. When you talk about winning Premier League titles or be, challenging for the big trophies, you need a full strength squad. You need, your defences to be keeping clean sheets. You need them to be solid. You need to trust them. Whereas I think that's probably the biggest problem Mourinho has is they're not keeping enough clean sheets, but also then if you look at them, they are defending deep because he doesn't trust them.
Are you seeing things that he could be doing differently then as a coach to ensure that deep defending leads to more clean sheets and leads to a better chance of getting that top 4?
I don't think any of us are in a position to tell José Mourinho how to coach his team. You look at everywhere he's been, he's won trophies, he's very successful. I think he's probably 2-3 pieces short of what he wants. You know, if you look at all the great teams he managed and won, they always had, you know, an incredible spine through the team. The Chelsea one is the obvious one, being in the Premier League with your Terry, your Lampard, your Drogba and your Cech. I feel he doesn't have the same, you know, with a centre-half. Højbjerg seems to be his kind of go-to man in midfield, that kind of steely midfielder who grafts, wins the ball. And of course, Harry Kane is the talisman, and Son is there as well. But it just doesn't have the same foundation as one of the teams he's won, where, you know, that can be successful and can keep clean sheets. You know, players that aren't going to make mistakes. And I think that's the biggest concern.
The big issue is he's got to keep the attacking talent there long enough for him to give himself the opportunity to buy defenders who are going to be capable of defending the way he wants them to. But I'm not sure if you're Harry Kane, do you believe that that's coming? Have you seen enough evidence of it just yet? Like, you can definitely see, if you were Harry Kane's agent, you'd be saying, you've given them everything. You built that stadium for them. Why don't you just go off and have some crack and win some trophies now? Go on. Every club in the world wants you, Harry. Go and do it.
Yeah, look, of course. That's got to be the biggest thing for Harry Kane. There's no doubting, like, he is a top class striker. You know, everybody knows that. Anyone, whether you support Tottenham or you don't, you've got to know that. And we've even seen the impact he's had on the team when he was injured. You know, results dropped for him, and it just shows how important his team. And it was almost felt to me like he was rushed back from injury, but he must have been all right. And you're talking about the agent. Look, the agent can tell you one thing, your father, mother, wife, anything can say something else to you. It's what's really in Harry's head. You know, the prime example, which Harry will probably look back on, would be Alan Shearer. Yes, Alan Shearer won a Premier League with Blackburn, so he kind of had that silverware, and then he was desperate to win it with his, you know, his childhood club. So he goes to Newcastle, but he then goes on to, you know, look, he's 260 Premier League goals. It's whether or not Harry is that desperate to win things, or does he chase the dream with, you know, Tottenham? Does he stay there and see the course? Of course, look, Manchester City, they're always talking about a new striker to replace Aguero. Like, he's almost the perfect fit for them, in the sense of someone who can play, score goals. I think the big question really is, what does Harry Kane want? It's all good and well your agent saying, you've done everything you can here, come on, let's go. But there's no doubting he's probably one of the top earners there. He's probably got the rub of the green every year. He probably runs the whole place. You know, you can see even the smallest things. I'd noticed that, and not a lot would, like, I know Hugo Lloris is captain, he's vice captain. Obviously the goalkeepers go out first. He's always the first man to lead them out. He kind of likes that important role as being, you know, kind of the outfield captain all the time. You know, obviously being England captain, it's just, does he want to then step into a new environment? Obviously, you're talking about going to win things. That's how we'll be judged at the end. But it's all down to Harry Kane.
Matt Doherty didn't start yesterday's game, but he came up in the conversation that we've already alluded to between Roy Keane and Jamie Redknapp. Yeah. This, if you rewind a little bit, David, goes back, maybe not goes back, but certainly if you look at Matt Doherty and what he said about Roy Keane in the past, he was very critical of Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane as managers of the Republic of Ireland. Was Roy Keane settling a score yesterday by bringing up Matt Doherty?
It's hard to say, really. Again, it's a bit like the Harry one. You'd have to ask Roy. Like, obviously, Matt came up with his comments. I remember them. I was a bit surprised with those comments at the time. Of course, look, when it's a catch-22, whenever a player doesn't play for a manager, they usually don't like the manager or have a problem with them. Whereas if you ask the lads who played regularly, my example, say me, I played quite a lot for Martin. You know, I never had a bad word to say about him. I still regularly speak to Martin. So, like, of course, Roy felt he had something to say, so he said it. But look, that's what it is. You know, Roy was obviously probably unhappy with what Matt had said in the past, and just felt yesterday was probably the opportunity. And you know, it's just the way it is.
The trouble for Matt Doherty is he doesn't have much of a comeback, does he, at the moment? Like, he hasn't got in the team, he hasn't improved Spurs, his game hasn't kicked on.
But it's is the grass always greener? You know, Matt was flying at Wolves. Everything was going well for him. You know, he's playing that wing-back role. You're playing week in, week out. Obviously, Wolves were doing fantastically well. You know, did well in the Europa League. And then, of course, if the opportunity comes to go to Tottenham, you're looking at saying, look, they're pushing top 4 all the time. They were in the Champions League final a few years ago. Maybe this is the next step for me in my career. And he goes and it doesn't work out. Like the big thing, Matt has played, of course, in the 5 with Tottenham, but it seems Mourinho now wants to play a 4 a lot more. So then that doesn't suit Matt, which it seems that he doesn't seem to trust Matt in a 4. But look, Matt's just got to keep his head down, keep working hard, and find a way into that team. Because look, results haven't been great for Spurs. Yes, they won 4-0 yesterday, but they are too inconsistent. If Matt can find some consistency, whether that be in training or the opportunities he does get in games, he's got to take them, because for Ireland's benefit, we can't have him sitting on the bench and not playing games. We need him in tip-top, shape coming into these international games.
Is Roy Keane like Arya Stark? Does he have like a list of people that he needs to exact revenge on, do you feel, in the Sky Sports studio?
It's almost as if you're trying to get me to say something about Roy, but it's... No, but look, Roy has his opinion. He's entitled to his opinion. I wouldn't say it's a case of that he wants to get one back over, lad. I think even the part of Matt's interview, he said he had a phone call with Roy. So I don't think Roy waits to go on Sky Sports to say something about someone. If Roy has a problem, he'll bring you and let you know. So I wouldn't say it's a case of he's waiting to be on Sky, waiting until that team's playing and that player's not playing to have a pop off them. I don't think that's the case, no. It's just the way that all arose yesterday from, I suppose, Jamie Redknapp giving his point and making his argument about Spurs and what he thought about the team, and then him and Roy kind of went tit for tat and went back and forth. But I don't think it's a case of Roy is on his way to the Sky studio and thinking, right, who's playing, who can I have a go of? I don't think that's certainly not the case, no.
Let's talk about Manchester United. Since Spurs hammered them, they've had, I think, is it 6 or 7 games against the so-called top 6 teams, and
5 draws and 1 loss.
5 nils, I think, and a 1-0. So 1 goal conceded and no goals scored. It's almost like they've had a massive overreaction to the absolute hammering that they took against Spurs. Is that what it is, a little bit? That in Solskjaer's head is like, okay, we tried to go out and play a bit of football and we got absolutely annihilated. What we're going to do is batten down the hatches, and ultimately, draws against these teams, that's not the worst thing in the world.
No. Of course, look, you listen to the pundits like Roy, whatever they said, like our mentality was to go and win games. If you scored 1, fine, we was going to score 3 or 4. I think the Tottenham game probably was an eye-opener for them when they got cleaned out. So they've just gone, let's be solid. Let's be hard to beat. Like United are second in the table, albeit yes, they're 12 points behind City. But it's a case of like in those games, when you're kind of, you're looking for an excuse and you kind of go, well, we've got the clean sheets. Now can we go and nick a goal or whatever? And you've seen that by Solskjaer's post-match interview where he kind of says, oh well, we were kind of robbed of that game. We should have had a penalty, and then they're talking about these small margins. But I think overall they'll be happy if we're not losing, if we're not conceding goals and we're not losing games. Can we add like more attacking flair and kind of create? They were poor yesterday in front of goal. Going forward, you think like of the players that they have with Greenwood, Rashford, Dan James, who I thought was excellent, and then of course I know Martial's not in great form, but certainly with Bruno. And I think there has been this big thing about Bruno, if you've seen it, like is kind of he's not scored or assisted in, obviously against the top 6 since that penalty he scored against Tottenham. It's kind of like, well, he does it against everyone else. I just feel that United are probably setting up in those games not to be beat. And if we nick one, we nick one, but we're certainly not going to concede. We're going to be, strong. I think United have been slightly lucky to find themselves in this position that it'll be one of those at the end of the season that they'll look back on those games. Could we have maybe gone on and won against the big 6, and then we could have closed the gap? Who knows if we could be next to Man City at the top of the table. I think that will probably be their regret. But certainly, look, it's a foundation to build on going forward. If you're drawing those games, That's what they'll be looking at. Can we now go on and win them? But definitely after the Tottenham game, there's been a big shift in mentality coming into the big games.
Damien Delaney repeatedly described them as submissive yesterday. Can a team who is submissive then turn into title winners the following season? Because it seems like a bit of a mentality shift.
It's going to be tough. Like you look at Manchester City are probably nailed on to win this. Obviously, the 12 points with 12 games to go. You know, we don't see them going on kind of this losing streak anytime. You can bet that Liverpool are obviously going to reevaluate their situation. They'll have their players back. They're going to be thinking, we want the Premier League title back. So, of course, it is going to be difficult for them, like Manchester United, to go on. There's no doubting that if they can pick up an extra couple of wins, and if you think about it, at the start of the season, their home form wasn't great, but their away form was. You know, if they turn some of them losses into draws into victories, you know, that gap would be shortened. So there's no doubting that they can certainly close the gap. They just need to turn around results. And you can imagine with Manchester United, they're going to look in the summer at the transfer market and see what areas they can, you know, pick up a key player who's available to obviously improve and strengthen the squad.
How many players do you think Manchester United need? Like, Martial at the moment, and his form is so bad. At the same time, most of the teams have carried somebody who hasn't been in great form as part of their attacking team, and have had to weather the storm with that. Even City to a certain extent earlier on in the year. You know, is it one player who contributes 20 goals from that? Is it one creative midfielder who would allow them to have like 40% possession in those games against the other sides in the top six, or 50% possession? Is that too much to ask?
Yeah, but they definitely need a striker that's going to get them 20 plus a season. Like, inverted commas, we've seen the stats of Haaland in Germany, in the Champions League, whatever. Just kind of makes you think, why didn't they sign him at that time? Martial is, look, he's very hot and cold when he's on it. If you remember when the season returned after lockdown, he was on fire. Now he's just kind of gone through a blip. There's no doubting he'll come good again and score goals. Cavani, unfortunately, is at the end of his career, and you can see the impact he's had and how good of a player he is. But I think United are probably, I'll go and say, 3 players short of really pushing. I think the centre halves, I think they need a proper partner for Harry Maguire. We've seen that. I think his partnership with Bailly is probably better than the partnership with Lindelof, probably because Bailly is more pace. They seem to complement each other well. Whether or not Ollie will actually stick with that, because he seems to play Maguire and Lindelof in all the big games. I think they need a world-class holding midfielder. Like Fred and McTominay do complement each other well as well. But we're talking about, if you look at the great Manchester United teams, they've always had spearhead midfielder. If you go back the early generations, which you kind of Brian Robson's, and then obviously Roy Keane, Paul Scholes. Even the next in line was Nicky Butt, who's a phenomenal player in the Premier League that people kind of underrate. You know, so those two would be the main two, and of course, someone to put the ball in the back of the net regularly. You know, Rashford and Greenwood will score a lot of goals. But if you can get an outright striker who's that, like, all he cares about, the kind of Ruud van Nistelrooy, Andy Cole, you know, those ones who are going to get you minimum 20 Premier League goals a season. Like the question I'd ask is, when was the last time a Manchester United player actually won the Golden Boot in the Premier League? If you look at it, like, it's always been like Aguero, Kane, Salah, Mane, Aubameyang to a certain extent, Jamie Vardy. Those fellas are all knocking at the door. If Manchester United can get someone who's going to score 20 plus Premier League goals, then there will be a case for them that they can win the Premier League title again.
Zlatan won it, I think, did he? Am I making this up?
Yeah, I think you're making that up. I don't think he won it, no.
Okay, I'll look it up. It's a good crappy quiz question there, Owen, if you want to steal one for Friday.
Yeah, that's actually a good question, yeah.
Van Persie was surely in the mix.
I was going to say I would have put Van Persie's the last to win it. If you had to pick me for one name, I would have said Van Persie. But then we're going back a good few years.
We're going back Ferguson. Like, that's the thing.
Exactly. And this is Manchester United. No, they are one of the world powerhouses in football. They've got some, like Rashford will still get you 15 goals. like Greenwood will get you probably the best part of 10 because he'll be in and out. It's only probably another 2-3 years before he really nails down that starting position. Bruno, of course, will score his goals. We know that. It's just Martial's only getting you 10 or 12. I think like that's the question mark when you look at Liverpool. Is like, even as I watched the game last night, Firmino goes through. You've got to score. Ramsdale makes a good save, yes, but I think it's a poor finish. And then like there's another one he can shoot and he passes. Like, albeit he gets the strike off for I think he'll be given as an own goal because it looked like it was off target. But that's kind of like Mane and Salah have pushed each other, but they've still turned out 20 plus goals. Firmino needs to get more goals. And if Manchester United can have their wingers scoring, but they've got a striker who's pushing, your Harry Kane, your Aguero, those boys with the 20 plus goals, then United will be a serious threat.
Van Persie was the last one in 2012, 2013, and the previous season. He did it back to back. 1 year for Arsenal, 1 year for Man United.
And did they win the Premier League?
In 2013, they did, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yeah, that was it. If the famous picture of Van Persie, obviously he goes to United, wins the league, but he has 20 on his back, and then United won their 20 Premier League trophy or whatever it was, 20 league, not Premier League trophy because they won 13, but 20th league trophy they won. Yeah. So that will show you, though, that they're crying out for that one who's going to get them a big number of goals.
Yeah, it's going to be a key signing. David, just one more thing I just wanted to ask you about, kind of in the context of the last few weeks. Manchester City are going to be nitpicked by everybody because they're so bloody good at the moment. But the last couple of weeks have been interesting when you look at the reintroduction of Kevin De Bruyne. So those Liverpool and Tottenham wins, where they were so brilliant, came without De Bruyne. And of course, he was excellent at the weekend as well, set up the Ruben Dias goal. But is Pep Guardiola struggling to get the best out of this team? They're free-flowing best when De Bruyne is in the team. Well, like, what position do you see him playing for the best version of him and the best version of the team?
I think he could play Kevin De Bruyne anywhere. I did see that debate was risen on Twitter where somebody said, are Manchester City better off without Kevin De Bruyne? I know they went on this mad big, start of the winning team when Kevin was injured or whatever, but you want Kevin De Bruyne in your team. Pound for pound, he's probably the best Premier League footballer. I think the last games, he's coming back from an injury as well. He's not going to be at full fitness. And of course, look, Manchester City the other day against West Ham. West Ham caused them problems. Like, West Ham they're not fourth as a joke. Like, they put it up to Manchester City. They caused them problems. They would have taken a lot from that performance. And I think it was Diop had a chance late on with the header. If he gets that right, it's a different ball game. They take a point. But I think with Manchester City, another game goes by, Kevin De Bruyne is getting himself back up to full fitness. Because whether it be, I don't know what he was out for, 3-4 weeks, it will take its toll on you that you lose that match sharpness. Once Kevin De Bruyne has that, then look, they're not slowing down for anyone. I wouldn't be surprised if they went and won their last 12 remaining games of the Premier League, the way they're playing, because they're not playing fantastic. Certainly in the last two, the Arsenal game and of course the West Ham game, but they're winning games. It looks so solid at the back. They don't look like they're going to see goals, and with the players that they have, it only takes one moment of brilliance from one of them that they'll score the goal. So to answer your question, Guardiola will find a way to make it work. They've always done it, and certainly I think any team in the world would take Kevin De Bruyne.
No question about that. It's just more, what would your combination in midfield be to complement him?
Well, I think the big thing for him is you can't really play Fernandinho and Rodri because they're both very similar. I think Rodri's more of a passer. Like, not saying that Fernandinho isn't a very good passer, because he is, but he's kind of the one who's always breaking up, counter-attacks, tackling. I think you just kind of play him, Gundogan and Kevin De Bruyne in front of the two of them, and then whether or not he goes with Mahrez or Bernardo on the right, Sterling on the left, and then Aguero through the middle. And then you kind of I think Gundogan kind of took on that responsibility of being the one that broke forward all the time. Look, Kevin could play as a deep lying playmaker, like alongside of Fernandinho or Rodri, and then just start singing balls around the place, or he can play that one more advanced for those kind of cues, through balls, passes, whatever. It's a good decision to have for Pep, to think, where am I going to fit all these world class players in?
Yeah, because you've got to stick Phil Foden on that team somewhere as well.
I know, like you think, but I've just rattled through the team there, and I've even left Phil Foden out. You know, that's the squad and depth they have. That's why they are where they are, and they're pushing on all fronts for all 4 trophies.
Yeah.
Like it's just a squad. Even the centre halves, you look at Diaz and Stones. We stopped talking about Laporte, who's been instrumental for them for the last few years. It's just crazy that the players they have.
Right, good stuff, David. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
David Meyler giving us some thoughts on the weekend there. If you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the number. You can always WhatsApp us on that, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. We get to them all as well. It's 20 minutes past 9. You're watching OTBAM. You can subscribe on the Off the Wall YouTube channel. You can watch us live every morning, every weekday morning from 7:30. If you miss us live, you can catch us on podcast. Search for OTBAM. You'll find segments across OTB. We're back after these with the Gillette Performance Rankings.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB.
For Sterling! Raheem Sterling!
OTB live commentary. Never miss the action right here on OTB Sports Radio. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, study the form with our Racing Post Spotlight before watching the action with free live streaming on all UK and Irish horse races. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Auto Mower.
Auto mower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Auto Mower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Now, from the 11th of March, Golf Weekly is moving to Patreon. If you sign up, you'll get a guaranteed podcast every Thursday and extra episodes around the biggest tournaments of the year. There'll be interviews with golf's biggest names. You'll also become an official friend of the pod. You'll be able to chat with the lads, Joe, Nathan, Peter and Fionn. You'll get invites to our golf days and enjoy exclusive watch parties around the majors. Go to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly and sign up now for $3.99 a month, or search Golf Weekly on patreon.com. The page is live now. It is time now for the Gillette Performance Rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance. Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTBAM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Right. Some performances were lacking some intensity at the weekend, but some were supreme, sublime. Where are we starting?
Let's just say Welsh sport has put its best foot forward, which we'll get to in just a moment. But there was a hell of a lot of competition for the worst performers this weekend, to the point where we've had to generalise our worst performers of the weekend, just referees in general. Your Gozers, your Masons, your Atwells, they all delivered with terrible, terrible performances over the course of the weekend. If we take this thing maybe in chronological order, let's start with Lee Mason on Saturday, refereeing in the Brighton versus West Brom game. He then allowed a Lewis Dunk free kick, only for VAR to then chalk off the strike. And when you watch this, it is pure drama, where you can see Lee Mason has realised he has lost complete control of the moment, where he doesn't know what's happened. Now, that happens to all of us. Like, have you ever walked into a supermarket and forgot what was on your shopping list? Like, it happens all the time. We walk into a room, forget what you walked into the room to do. That was Lee Mason at the moment. He's like, what's just happened here? What has just happened? Lewis Dunk, obviously fuming afterwards. He says, I don't think he knew what he was doing. I said to him, can I take the free kick? He said, yes. I took it, and then it went into the back of the net. Why didn't he give the goal? He knew he said go. To make matters worse then for Lee Mason, he proceeded to suffer a calf injury. And everybody thought that he had pulled himself from the Liverpool game last night. as fourth official, but actually he was injured. He got injured on Saturday, so that's why he was missing last night. It was a terrible performance. Like, you feel sorry for the guy because it's just the human condition setting in that sometimes we just forget to do things that are the correct thing to do, and that's what happened to him in a very public forum. Another person who that happened to, maybe on a more benign level, because who knows what he was thinking here, is Pascal Gauzer. And the way I would describe the Owen Farrell situation, where he says, go speak to your team, and then allows Dan Biggar to cross the pitch, is shouting at somebody, hey, look, a distraction, and then running around the person and getting away with it like that. Because Pascal Gauzer and Eddie Jones have had run-ins in the past. In 2018, Eddie Jones was pretty annoyed with how Gauzer handled a game that he said he had publicly brought the issue up with World Rugby. In 2019, Gauzer was the ref for a World Cup warm-up game between England and Wales. In that situation as well, there was a quick penalty from Dan Biggar, and Anthony Watson, who had just been sent to the sin bin, was leaving the pitch. They had to wait for that to happen in the eyes of England, but Wales played on. And Eddie Jones, after the game, said maybe the yellow card should have been shown to the referee rather than to Anthony Watson. So this isn't the first time that Gauzer and Eddie Jones have had a bit of a run-in. Now, unfortunately for all of us, Eddie Jones managed to zip up and not actually say anything that stupid on Saturday night. I'm sure it was very tempting for him to do so. Same with Owen Farrell. But Gauzer, not a great performer. And then the third person in the trilogy of referees from the weekend is Stuart Atwell. So I'm sure you're familiar with that meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Charlie's in front of the conspiracy board and he's just completely losing his mind at the conspiracy that's unfolding all around him. That is what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is in this situation. Stuart Atwell is Pepe Sylvia, and he has got to the point now where the conspiracies about Manchester United have fed into his own view that it is the world against us. So Callum Hudson-Odoi handles the ball in the penalty area yesterday, doesn't get a penalty. Then Luke Shaw comes out after the game, and he is also believing this conspiracy, Lark. He says, I don't know why they stopped it if it's not going to be a pen. The ref told Harry, if I say it's a pen, there's going to cause a lot of talk about it after. So Luke Shaw said that in his post-match interview yesterday, and United then had to come out and play down Luke Shaw's comments, stating that the left-back had actually misheard Stuart Atwell. So United are like, let's distance ourselves from this a little bit. But Solskjaer then, not doubled down on that, but says, I don't want to cause controversy. It's all these outside influences. VAR talk from Chelsea about Harry. That's cheeky putting it up on their website. This was the talk about Harry Maguire in the build-up to the game. That's influencing referees. You obviously had Jurgen Klopp coming out a few weeks ago talking about all the penalties that Manchester United get, and Solskjaer kind of alluded to all these forces that are at play at the moment. So the referees didn't have a great weekend, but Manchester United are really buying in to the conspiracy that everybody is out to get them when it comes to officiating.
They might be right. Number 4, poor performance, Italian rugby.
Yeah, like, I mean, how bad would Italy need to have played for them to be in bottom spot is the question I would have. Like, it would probably need to be 100 points for them to actually surprise us with their crapness. Like, playing Italy is like driving through the speed arrows in Mario Kart or Crash Bandicoot, and that is something that maybe we need to bear in mind a little bit when it comes to the next few weeks for Ireland. Maybe this will have a material impact on Ireland's successes, and like that brings us nicely on to number 3 here, which is Ireland. Firmly in the orange is where I would put them. I don't think you can get too carried away. Exactly, grand. But is there, you don't believe in momentum, you think it's absolute nonsense, but is there a little bit of a spring you can get?
I believe in confidence, Owen. These are different things. Go on.
Well, that's it. Is there a spring that you can get from hammering a really bad team?
Yeah.
That will have a material impact on the next game against Scotland?
Yeah, because players suddenly feel like they're confident and they can try things and they take that with them.
So, like, I mean, that is probably a material element of momentum is what I would say, but that's probably a debate for another day. There's not too much else to say here. We had Alan Quinlan on earlier on. Ireland, grand. It was an okay performance.
I think the fact that Joey Carbery came back at the weekend, it was a great weekend for Irish rugby, and that's why I would probably tip them into the green, because if Carbery comes back, all of a sudden you have Carbery starting and Johnny Sexton off the bench in 18 months' time, and everybody's delighted and everybody's really happy. And you've got Craig Casey probably starting alongside Joey Carbery, and that's an unbelievably exciting half-back partnership. The backs played quite well. We now have some new bodies coming through into the team. Our back row strength and depth suddenly looks pretty good again. Jack Conan is fit and could play at 8. Nobody would have any concerns about him. You've got a bunch of 6s, a couple of 7s who are playing and who are fit, and I think that the mood music is up anyway.
For sure. We move on to the Welsh section of this morning's show. You can join us now, Welsh folk, fans of any sport really. You're welcome this morning, because at number 2, it is Gareth Bale. 2 goals yesterday in Spurs' dominant win over Burnley. He's now been directly involved in 7 goals in his last 4 appearances for Spurs in all competitions. This is the first time he has scored twice in a match since September 2019, and has now scored in successive club appearances for the first time since August and September 2018. Gareth Bale is rolling back the clock here a little bit, that if you're a Tottenham fan, if you're a Wales fan, there's a sign of legitimate hope here that Gareth Bale could go on a run of form over the next couple of months that might see him rekindle part of his greatness at the very least. A brilliant performance yesterday. But at number 1, you can take this away, Ger. The Grand Slam is on. The Welsh rugby team are absolute world beaters. Nobody ever doubted them and their great coach, Wayne Pivac. We knew that they would stuff everybody in this year's Six Nations. We called it, of course, and they have duly gone along and beaten everybody, and they're going to go and claim the Grand Slam once again. I worship our new Welsh overlords, is all I'm going to say this morning.
They might be the greatest team in the world at the moment. They certainly, by the end of this tournament, they're going to have beaten up everybody in the Northern Hemisphere, because at this stage you would make them heavy odds on to beat the French, just the way everything's going. The fact that the French team are completely destroyed by COVID, and who knows when that game might actually get played. But if that game was to get played, just as the French are coming out of their period of COVID recuperation and find themselves somewhat weakened, well then that would be the most bizarre Grand Slam in the history of Grand Slams. It would be unbelievable. The odds on a sending off, unbelievable refereeing decisions, England being so flaky, by the way. England's flakiness is getting a little bit passed over here. Managed to get themselves back into the game after the bad refereeing decisions, and then too tired, can't be. Do we have to do this? Very flaky. But the one thing is, the Welsh are definitely playing for their head coach. We said that after the Ireland game, and their skill level is off the charts. We always kind of known this, that whole thing about it being their national sport. That manifests itself in games like that where, and in games like the Ireland game where the ball was kind of greasy. They were still just that level ahead when it came to it. But their forwards were sensational against England. The Vinopolas were getting stopped in the tackle and pushed backwards, which normally when we watch them, they're that whole dominant tackle malarkey, they're crushing us. So fair play, Wales. Never doubted you.
Yeah, well, very, very happy Monday indeed to all the Welsh people out there. I'm really disappointed actually that the COVID situation has actually developed in this way. Obviously, Wales might benefit in the end, but a proper final day of the Six Nations Grand Slam face-off between Wales and France might have actually happened had the France game gone ahead last weekend. They'd beaten Scotland. It wouldn't have been the most ridiculous thing in the world to have seen that happen. I know France obviously have to play England, don't they, next time out, so it's no guarantee that they would have been in that place. But that's what you want to see. As much as we try to take the piss out of Wales, you want to see a proper battle on the last day where the winner takes the Grand Slam. That'd be an amazing conclusion to this.
Our audience suggestions. Ross says Matt Doherty should be on the rankings. Poor Matt Doherty. He's one of the red people from the weekend, just for the stuff that he was getting from Roy Keane. Philip Doyle says stick Harry Byrne down there and Tyg Byrne for man of the match. Good shouts. The Burns, this is the era of the Burns taking over Irish rugby. Luke Shaw should be there, the best left back in England, says Michael. Harrison says Will Connors. Brian says Matt Williams for having absolutely no sympathy for England. His laughter at halftime on Virgin Media was certainly hilarious. Burn987 on Instagram says Bale, Arteta, Wales, City and Jamie Redknapp. You haven't been lording it over us. The Mikel Arteta era is here. The man seems to have turned a corner. Everything is going well.
Yes, I saw someone did make a very valid point, though, that they could so easily have been knocked out of the Europa League last Thursday night. And, they might not have had the heart in the previous season to fight back against Leicester City yesterday either. And if they lose those 2 games, we're now sitting here this morning saying Mikel Arteta is under massive pressure. So I'm keen to not get too far ahead of myself, considering Arsenal are lurking just inside the top half. But you look at, let's go for it, Mikel Arteta, greatest manager in the world.
Well, Pepe looks good again.
And Willian, yesterday, all of a sudden, I think I genuinely believed that was a disastrous piece of business. When he signed, I thought this might actually work, and it quickly showed that it's not going to work whatsoever. However, yesterday, it looked as if Willian might actually be worth something to Arsenal. Like he was signed on a 3-year deal last summer, so they need to try and make light of the situation in some way by getting some use out of the player that he probably hasn't been for a lot of the season. But yeah, no, he's made players better. He's definitely made players better. Martin Odegaard has come in as well. He's going to play a lot more now. It looks like Emile Smith-Rowe got a nasty enough injury yesterday, and things are ticking along nicely. But to have this sort of season now is decent because Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang has been a passenger for a lot of the season. Like if we were sitting here at the start of the year saying Aubameyang is going to be a shadow of his former self for basically the entire year, we would expect this. So it's about par for the course when your best player is. I know he scored a hat-trick against Leeds a few weeks ago, but he has been bang average for a lot of this year, and that has been one massive issue.
The new Mesut Ozil, I hear you say. James says, Ringrose, great game, dangerous ball in hand, reliable in defence. And then Keane says, Hugo Keenan, is he a Lions bolter? May well be a Lions bolter. He wouldn't bet against getting in the squad if it was to be named just now. But there's games against England and Scotland to come. That will dictate who gets on the plane for the Lions. So there's lots up for grabs for that Ireland team. That's it for this week from the Gillette Performance Rankings.
OTBAM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
Yeah, so it is bang on 9:36 this morning. Jack Byrne has been ruled out for 3 months because of back surgery. It's been confirmed by Nicosia this morning. We're going to chat with Jack on OTBAM later on this week. A reminder, OTBAM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. I'm going to bring you some more reaction to the weekend of sport. First, we're going to hear from Andy Farrell after Ireland's win against Italy, but also Damien Delaney after OTB brought you live radio commentary of Manchester United 0, Chelsea 0.
Damien Delaney had finished Chelsea 0, Manchester United 0. Wasn't a classic, entertaining enough game, but just to go back quickly on the penalty decision, where you were happy enough with the VAR on that one, were you?
Yeah, I mean, it's flip of a coin. Man United fans will undoubtedly say it should have been a penalty, and Chelsea fans will undoubtedly say it wasn't. You know, I think it was borderline. If it was given, I'd have said fair enough, and it wasn't given, I'd have said fair enough. It was a judgment call from the referee. My own personal view is I don't think it was a penalty, but I've seen them give in, and it's very grey area.
On the balance of play, you'd have to say it was probably a deserved result, or a fair result between the two sides.
It probably was. I mean, you know, Chelsea did almost certainly force the issue. They tried to win the game. They had the more clear-cut chances. United a lot of shots from distance, pot shots, tried to turn it over. The killer ball, the final ball wasn't quite there. But, you know, Chelsea forced the issue, I thought, more than Manchester United. But Manchester United soaked up an awful lot of pressure and then countered. So, all in all, Chelsea will be disappointed they didn't win it, and I think United will be more than happy with the draw.
The goalkeeper selection at Chelsea has been a talking point over the last season and a half, and Kepa Arrizabalaga has been left aside by Thomas Tuchel in the same way that Frank Lampard left him aside as well. Mendy's come in and he's picked up a lot of clean sheets along the way. He's done okay, but I don't know if I'm 100% convinced on him yet. And we saw there today he had a few nervy moments where he let the ball drop. What's your feeling on him so far?
I think he's a decent keeper. You know, it's his first year in the league. He's only just come in. A lot of money, a lot of pressure on him, I suppose. But he looks more than capable with his feet. He made a couple of good saves today, and all that people say, you know, he punches a lot of things. But that Rashford free kick, very, very difficult. Maybe the Fred shot at the end was moving a little bit as well, and he just tried to get a hand on it and get it away. But I mean, that ball very nearly fell to Anthony Martial. So he's maybe a touch fortunate there, but look, he's a good keeper. He's going to develop, he's going to get better. He's playing in a new league for the first time. I think Chelsea should be happy enough with him.
I mentioned in commentary the performance from Azpilicueta. We don't hand out a man of the match, but I would imagine he'd be a leading candidate for that today. He was brilliant. He was getting his head on a lot of stuff. He was defending really well for Chelsea, and funny in the way that Lampard had kind of left him aside as well, but he's come back in under Thomas Tuchel and he's been playing really good.
Yeah, he is, and I mean, that right side of three probably suits him now. You know, for a period of time there he was one of the best attacking right backs, loads of energy up and down. With him moving inside to right side of three centre backs just saves his legs a little bit, and he can do one thing he's very, very good at, and that's defending. You know, he's real tough, dogged, tenacious defender, 1v1, gets his head in, old-fashioned defender, loves blocking shots, loves getting in the way of things, loves being a nuisance. And he totally shut down Marcus Rashford when he was out there at the end of the game, and I think it was James. They all had a go at him, and he done really well against them all.
So Chelsea, you know, as you said during the commentary a few times, there wasn't like a cutting edge. They weren't creating enough clear-cut chances. We can see, though, a style of play or philosophy developing under Thomas Tuchel. It's not going to happen straight away. We know that. I think, a lot of people watching football these days can be a little bit impatient. But what can you see from Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea so far? What's his style of play? What does he want to do?
Very, very strong defensively. That's first and foremost. His defenders really are good defenders. The team's set up, with Kante coming in. Almost 2 number 6s, not quite as out and out defensive as Manchester United, but he always plays with 2 sitters, and he allows the other players, the wing backs and the 3 attacking players. So there's 5 attacking and 5 defending almost. I know towards the end there he threw on an awful lot of attackers just trying to win the game because he felt they were in the ascendancy, and Manchester United only threat was the counter attack. So the next step for him now is to win these types of games. He's had enough of the play. He's enough good players. He needs to give them a platform or a way of playing that will let them go on and not just dominate these games but win them as well, because he had a couple of 0-0 draws. So defensively they're quite solid, but games where they find it hard to break opposition teams down, he needs to find a way to win these games now, but that's the next step for him.
When you say he's enough good players, what about strikers? Because the 2 leading men there are Tammy Abraham and Olivier Giroud. Giroud seems to have kind of risen above Abraham in the pecking order. Abraham last season was excellent. I know he went maybe a little bit off the boil towards the end of last season. He struggled for form this season. And Giroud, again, he's a veteran striker at this stage. He will always come in with a run of games where he'll score a few goals, but then he seems to go quiet again. So do you think, are those 2 strikers, are they going to be good enough to get Chelsea top 4 this season? And is it a position where Tuchel is going to look to strengthen in the summer?
I think so. I think a number 9 will be top of his list really. He has almost everything else. But Giroud is was or should have been 3rd choice striker at Chelsea. And he's one of the guys that will come off the bench, maybe get 10-15 starts a season and get you 8, 9, 10 goals. That's his role really, and that's why they were sort of him leaving, because he wanted more. Very, very difficult to ask someone like Olivier Giroud to play week in, week out European football during the week and this. As you get older, you cannot just keep going to the well. And I think today was just a kind of a bridge too far for him. He found it very, very difficult. He's an old-fashioned number 9. He just wants to stay high up the pitch and get service, and let all the young lads run around him. Tammy Abraham, I don't know what's going on there. As you said, maybe he's not kind of at the level, the required level. And Timo Werner is slowly, I suppose, finding a little bit of form after.
And he seems to play more on the wide left.
Yeah, and maybe he was brought into play as a number 9 as well. So they probably have enough wingers and number 10s really, and then maybe if Tuchel doesn't see Werner playing as a number 9. So probably one player they're missing, and maybe Tuchel will say, well, we had enough possession, we put enough crosses in. If I had a real number 9, a Sergio Aguero type player, we would have got some goals today. And that probably is a valid argument, but he hasn't, so he needs to figure out a way to get all those great diminutive number 10s high up the pitch in a better positions to score goals.
He's been linked with, or Chelsea been linked with Erling Haaland, and they're not going to be the only. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I mean, every club is probably putting out those stories. He's the hottest player in world football. I think he would immediately make every team better.
Yeah. Looking at Manchester United, they're still in 2nd place. They're way off the title already. You'd have to say 12 points now off the leaders Manchester City, who they'll be playing next weekend. But they're just such a strange team to try and assess, because they're up in 2nd place, but they've never really, as I said to Joe before the game, and we were previewing the match, they haven't really got people. If there was fans there, they wouldn't really up out of their seats watching this dazzling football being played by this United team. They play dazzling football in patches at times, like they demolished Leipzig earlier in the season, but not on a consistent basis, as you'd expect from a great Manchester United team.
Yeah, I don't think they're anywhere near the required level. I think once Man City are obviously going to win the league this year, they're just not an enjoyable team to watch. But then for every point you make about Manchester United, there's 4 counterpoints that United fans will throw at you. We're 2nd in the league, we scored the most amount of goals in the league, so how can we be dull and boring? But they counter-attack, and they're very, very effective at it. But in big games, when they get to finals, I haven't been to one, but when they get to semi-finals, invariably you come up against good opposition. Champions League, Leipzig, the last game, PSG, and even Besiktas, these are good teams. And if you haven't got that level of I suppose, ability to alleviate pressure by dominating the ball at some point. You cannot give good teams 60, 70, 80% of the ball. Next week against Man City, they're going to find that if they give up that amount of possession to Manchester City, they're going to get beat, because in Manchester City have enough quality players that no matter how good you are defensively, they will get you eventually. You have to wrestle control the game somehow, and they don't control the game, and I suppose they sit back and they counter-attack, but if you take that weapon away from them, which I think Chelsea did reasonably well today, then there's not a whole lot else in their armoury.
Looking at the two centre-backs who come in for a lot of criticism when things go wrong, Victor Lindelof played really well today, and he made some really crucial interceptions and blocks and clearances. A lot of the focus seems to be on him when things go wrong, whereas it sometimes seems a lot of people out there who would have an opinion on the centre-halves think that Lindelof would actually be a better centre-back than Harry Maguire. But I
think that. I think Lindelof and Baird are probably their best pairing, really. Yeah. It would allow them to free up some space in the middle of midfield, because unfortunately these two centre-backs, I've been saying it since the start of the season, they need to be babysat. They need two number 6s in front of them, because they cannot be left exposed. Whereas you've got someone like Donny van de Beek sitting on the bench. If you could take out a 6 and play with one number 6 and put a Donny van de Beek in there, now all of a sudden you've got 5 defenders and 5 attackers, whereas at the minute Man United have to play with 6 defenders and 4 attackers, and the fullbacks don't really contribute. If you can play that way if you want, but your fullbacks then have to contribute, i.e. the way that Hudson-Odoi did today, and Reece James and Chilwell on the other side, and the way Trent and Andy Robertson do for Liverpool. Again, the counterpoint to that is Shaw's in a great run of form, but it's only recently, it's only the month of February. Before that, his numbers, both their numbers, Wan-Bissaka's and Shaw's numbers were terrible, in terms of goals and assists. But again, the counterpoint to that is they're fullbacks. But if you're going to play with 2 number 6s, you have to release your fullbacks, or you have to have fullbacks to contribute. And unfortunately, I think they're getting that balance wrong right now, Man United. But again, Man United fans will say, well, he's building, in time he will. But you've played Baird and Lindelof, I think you could get away with 1 number 6.
A lot of what you were saying, to be critical of United would seem to lead all the way back to Solskjaer, that he's maybe perhaps limited as to what he can do as a coach, that he's not maybe on the same tactical level.
You've been listening to me, haven't you? I've been saying that since day dot. I don't think he's a guy. I don't think he's. I think there's more in this Manchester United team. I think they're different. Like nobody's set out to be a counter-attacking team. It's something you almost fall into because you haven't got any other weapons, So I just think that another manager, a more tactically aware manager, or a motivational manager, a confident manager, would set this United team up differently. That would give them more of a killer blow, as opposed to just waiting to win the ball back. Give it to Fernandes and say, "Oh, can you help us? Can you do something?" Yeah. But he's struggling in the big 6. I'm not surprised, because when you've got 6 defenders and 4 attackers, it's very, very difficult against really good teams to create chances and score goals. Against the likes of mid-table, bottom-half Premier League teams, you'll get more chances. But you saw today, unless you've got help or you've got someone stretching Chelsea's midfield, Kante's going to gobble them up all day. So many times it's just 4 attackers or shots from distance. And I think a club of Manchester United's stature need to have more.
Just to wrap up, I want to ask you finally about, obviously the big game next weekend will be the Manchester Derby. You'll be on doing that off the ball, Damien. I asked Vinnie Perth about this last week, about the possibility of City doing a quadruple. A lot of things seem to be going in their favour. They're already in the final of the League Cup, which is in April against Tottenham. They're in the last 8 of the FA Cup against Everton, who they've already beaten at Goodison Park in recent weeks. They're, clear in the Premier League. It's hard to see them being reeled back in by Manchester United. And then, of course, is the Champions League, the competition which Pep Guardiola has struggled in so much in recent seasons. So, what is the realistic possibility of City winning all 4 trophies this season?
It's a possibility. It's going to be very, very difficult for them. Champions League is going to be hard. The sooner they can put the Premier League to bed, if they win next week, I think then they can coast in the Premier League and get that over the line relatively soon. The Tottenham game will be a confidence booster if they can get a trophy in the bag. If Jose Mourinho's Tottenham is never an easy, even though they're inconsistent, you feel Jose would love to scupper that dream for Pep. And obviously it's an FA Cup. It's going to be very, very difficult, but they've got a chance. They're in a good place. They look fit, they look fresh, they look hungry, they look dialed in, so they've got a chance.
Thanks, Amy.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
How pleased are you with that performance? How much of what you wanted to see did you actually see? Well, first of all, I'm really proud of the players. You know, they've shown the real character over the last couple of weeks. It's not nice going after 2 losses and waiting a couple of weeks to try and put that right. And you know, we talked about it's a test of character, and they've stayed strong. They've stayed very united together, and yeah, there's as a group, I think they've all pulled together and showed their leaderships in different ways. And I thought we earned the right to score some points with the way that we approached the game in the first half. I thought our attitude was top class. We approached the game in the right manner. We paid the game the right respect, and Italy the right respect. And I thought we punched away really well in the first half, and the game opened up in the end.
Can I just ask you about Hugo Keenan? Does his performances recently take away your options? I mean, does it make your decision easy going forward as to who your fullback should be?
Well, what we keep talking about as far as selection is concerned is when there's 50-50 calls to be had, then you leave it in the hands of the coaches, you know, and sometimes those 50-50s, it just becomes a judgment call. But when players are playing really well and put their hands up and make those calls non-debatable, I suppose that's up to the players, and there's quite a few players that's done that out there today.
Thanks, Andy.
Hi, Andy. How are you going? I just ask you how exciting it is to give Craig Casey and Ryan Baird their debut, and how big a future can they have with Ireland?
I've just said to them there that the 2 guys, I was waiting for the nerves to kick in all week. They was absolutely nerveless, and an absolute credit to themselves and to the families. And again, you know, in these COVID times, I feel for the families not to be able to come out to Rome and see that experience, because the sons were outstanding. You know, they became men today. They got about their jobs quietly all week, and the nerves never really set in at all. And the only thing that I asked of them today was to be themselves, and there was that in spades. So I thought they was outstanding. And then the other guys, obviously Robbie Henshaw. Yeah, I don't know what else we can say about Robbie other than he was top class, top draw today. Some players put pressure on themselves when they reach milestones, and the other players just grab the occasion by their own hands and embrace the pressure, embrace the occasion, etc., and take the game to the opposition. And from minute 1, I mean, that was an outstanding performance from Robbie in that first 40 minutes. So well done to the 3 of them.
Can I just ask you about Jordan and then the 3 front row guys who came off? What were their injury issues, and are there any more?
There's a few niggles that we need to assess in the morning, especially after the flight home this evening. So we'll see how people pull up. Jordan had a little bit of a tightness in his hip flexor, so we had Earlsey on early enough because we didn't want to take a risk there. Tig had just gone over his ankle, but he seemed to walk off pretty well. Ronan's just got a dead calf, so he's going to be good. And David Kilcorn failed his HIA, but he's in good spirits in the changing room as well.
Thank you.
Andy, how beneficial is Italy have now conceded 19 tries in 3 games? How beneficial is the intensity levels of this test match going to Murrayfield, and with England coming to Dublin?
I wouldn't want to be. I don't know whether you're trying to be disrespectful or not, or not there.
No, I'm just stating the facts that they have conceded 139 points in 3 test matches. So how do you mould that towards you? How beneficial is that for you going to Murrayfield and England coming?
We know if we don't get our own intensity right, that we don't earn the right to score the tries that we have today. I thought that's what we did. First and foremost, and again, we approached the game in the right manner, and we earned the right to score the tries. Does that prepare us well for Murrayfield? Look, we take a break now. We've got a weekend off, and we dust ourselves down, and we prepare as best we can for Murrayfield. You know, we had 2 weeks off, like I say, leading into this game. And the question's been asked during the week, are you on a hiding to nothing? Well, not for us, because we judge our own performance, and our attitude was good today.
Did you feel that performance, that first half in particular, was coming? Could you see it?
Yeah, I could actually, just because of the manner, and like we said all week, They want to play with ambition. They want to play with energy. They've got some big, strong boys out there, and you've got to approach the game from a set piece point of view, from a kicking point of view, from a defensive point of view, from a breakdown pressure point of view. I thought all those bits came together. And we earned the right to strike at the right moments in the first half. And I thought our forwards punching onto the wall was a different level today, and the backs finished them off. So I thought the game was well connected.
Okay, guys, we have time for just one more.
Andy, I'll go ahead, Rory, you can go for it. No, it's okay, Pat. It's fine. Andy, I just wanted to ask you about James. No, there was, I think you made 6 or 7 changes to this game this weekend, but James was someone you kind of kept faith with on the left. What is it? 102 yards, 102 metres gained, and close to a try as well. Were you happy with his performance today?
Yeah, happy enough. The thing for James, and why he's got a little bit of continuity in the last 3 games, is because he's new. He's new to international rugby. He's new to finding his feet at this level. By his own right, I'm sure that he'd tell you that it's a step up. He's starting to find his feet, and I think it's the same for Jameson Gibson Park, as well. They're starting to find their feet at this level, and we're burning the fruits from that.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.